you kidding? They used to call me Grifty McGrift. I wrote the book on flim-flamming.
Wow, he did.
Now, this scam was in The Sting Part 2, so nobody knows about it.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans, brought to you by ThatShelf.com. Every episode, we talk about a movie parodied on The Simpsons. Maybe it was The Simpsons that introduced us to the film, or maybe when we finally saw it, we realized, hey, that's where that Simpson joke came from. Regardless, each week we pick one that one of us hasn't seen or hasn't seen in a while, watch it, and come together to discuss. I'm your host, Adam Scholes, and joining me as always is the Addie to my Moses, my co-host, Nate Storing. How are you today, my old friend?
Like a precocious little girl, I guess.
Yeah, that's how I would describe you.
Yes, I do have a bit of a girlish energy, I guess. Maybe a bit of a tomboy.
Yeah, fair enough.
How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing well. Last night, me and my cousins and my wife, we went to a Simpsons-themed escape room.
Ooh, okay.
So combining basically two of my favorite things. I'm a big fan of escape rooms because it's like an adventure game in real life, and and The Simpsons, and we had a great time. I had seen like previews of it online.
Mm-hmm. Were you being fed it on Instagram? Like
yes, exactly. Yeah. So my wife hadn't seen anything. And when the door opened and we walked in, she was like, oh, wow, like this really does kind of look like The Simpsons. And she kept saying, I was so excited for you. Like, I knew you were going to have such a good time. And we did. We beat it with 20 minutes to spare. Because we are so smart, SMRT. And it was really fun. It's definitely not a licensed situation. So hopefully the Disney Corporation doesn't find out. Although knowing that the show may or may not listen to us, please do not go after these guys. But no, it was really fun. And what
was the plot, I guess, of the escape room?
The plot was Springfield was like basically about to experience some sort of nuclear holocaust, and then you discovered at the last minute that for some reason Krusty was responsible. Which again, as we were saying during it, we're like, really, it should have been like Sideshow Bob, but maybe the creators they tried to keep it, I guess, like, because when we got into it, my cousin's wife, who's technically my cousin too, but she was like, how well do you need to know the show? And they're like, you just basically need to know like the main characters. So it was clear that they were in the theme, but they didn't want to make it. They didn't want to make it for just like nerds or whatever, like me. But Scott, my actual cousin, and I kept being like, this is an interesting choice. This is an interesting choice. But it was really fun, and had they definitely had some deep cut references. If you follow me on Instagram, I posted some photos from the room so you can sort of get a sense of it. But nice. It was fun. So
that's very cool. I don't know if we have anything like that around here. I mean, somewhere in New York there must be some unlicensed Simpsons escape room, I'd imagine.
Well, and then the funniest thing was we went for drinks afterwards, and the subject of Simpsons World at Universal came up, and we discovered that I was the only person in the group who hasn't been, and Liz, my cousin's wife, was like, so wait, you're the only one of us here who hasn't been to Simpsons World? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, and you're the one with the Simpsons podcast? Something about this doesn't feel right. And I was like, yes, I'm well aware of that fact.
You do have to go. It is very, very cool, and I feel like it's actually probably going to go away.
Right? Yeah, well, we were discussing this. We're like, with Disney owning it, it is a little weird that like Universal theme parks has Simpsons, so presumably that license is going to expire. But also, does like Disney have room to put one in? Would they put one in? Like, I don't know. So
don't know.
I do really want to try and see it before it no longer exists. But
yeah, you should just take a trip to LA anyway, because like between the Simpsons connection there and then like all of the movie stuff, I mean, you'd have a blast, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this week we watched Paper Moon, our second movie directed by Peter Bogdanovich on the show, which you might remember from such Simpsons episodes as Season 12's The Great Money Caper. I mean, it's only one, so let's just get into it. The Great Money Caper, not The Great Muppet Caper.
Not The Great Muppet Caper, and shockingly, apparently not a reference to The Great Muppet Caper.
Well, there you go. I mean, missed opportunity, because that movie...
I know. Apparently, it was just like... They needed a title for the episode, and they were like, let's just do a like what you see is what you get title.
Right,
and
yeah,
that's what they
exactly.
came up with. And it just so happens to sound exactly like The Great Muppet Caper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's so funny. Season 12, Episode 7, directed by Mike Frank Polcino and written by Carolyn Omine. Original air date December 10th, 2000, 27 years after the release of the movie. And if you don't remember, this is the one where Homer and Bart become con men and get in a little over their heads. And this is a classic instance of when I started my rewatch. I was like, I really don't think I remember this one. And then as it unfolded, I was like, oh, yeah. But it's that classic instance of where, like, Act 1 is so far removed from the rest of the story that it takes a second for you to go, oh, right, that's what this is going to.
And the hinge point is literally a sturgeon falling from outer space and landing on their car. This is how you know you're in season 12.
Yeah, exactly. But that being said, I did once. It was the Michael Jackson marionette then I was like, oh yeah, I remember this one. So, well, Nate, talk us through the reference, because I mean, this is I have to say I really actually enjoyed rewatching this. I think because it's at that tail end and it's not one that I've seen 1,000 times. But yeah, talk us through.
Yeah, so there's sort of like a couple different elements, I think, to the paper moon-ness of this episode. So there is a scene where Homer and Bart try to grift Flanders into paying for a personalized Bible for Maude, which is like directly a reference to this movie.
Yes, late Maude Flanders.
Yes, the late Maude Flanders at this point.
Well, before she died, she ordered this Bible especially for you.
Why, there's my name in gold.
Now, you weren't home, so we had to pay the delivery man.
Well, I'll just reimburse you right. Wait a minute.
And Flanders even calls it out, where he's like, this seems a lot like that movie Paper Moon.
This seems an awful lot like that movie Paper Moon.
Run, Dad!
Which I have to say, I don't believe that Ned has seen Paper Moon. It just based on his character, that does not track.
No, not at all. He makes a point of avoiding any kind of content that might be even remote. Like the fact that he even watches movies is surprising. Ben-Hur, sure, I get it, but like that seems like the only kind of movie that Ned Flanders probably watches is like religious epics. So yeah, a little maybe stretches credulity a little bit. The other thing that's funny about this scene, of course, is that it's so different to do this to strangers than it is to do it to your next door neighbor when you know the person who died personally. It's like so much more terrible.
It's dark.
So yeah, it's dark. But the interesting thing about this episode, I guess, is that it is one of those episodes that is a classic genre mashup, right? So we talked about with Matt Selman, the After Hours parody that they did in the most recent season. And it's kind of like a mashup parody of all those different 80s New York movies, right?
Right.
This is kind of a similar thing where it's like, it's really mashing up several different famous con man movies, right? So it's pulling from Paper Moon. It's pulling from maybe The Sting. I think it's pulling from The Sting and The Sting 2, supposedly. It's pulling from on the commentary, at least they say it's pulling from House of Games.
Oh, okay. The Mammoth movie.
Right. And so it's kind of bringing all of those things together so that it's like it's a little bit more than just like a parody of one specific movie. It's really more a parody of this micro genre of con man movies.
Right.
But the thing that made me want to do Paper Moon specifically is because you have this dynamic in this episode between Homer and Bart doing the cons together that feels a lot like this movie.
Totally. I mean, we've sort of alluded to the more obvious, like, con-related films, but what other movie references or pop culture references did you catch?
Right. So the one that is pretty funny, and again, like, I've never seen it. I don't think anyone has. The Sting 2, right? They call out in the dialogue, Grandpa's like, this scam was from The Sting Part 2, so nobody knows about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think this is actually a double joke, because the scam that they then do, I found no evidence that it is actually from The Sting 2.
It wouldn't. There's no way it even could be, because The Sting both. Well, again, I haven't seen The Sting 2, but
Right, exactly.
Assuming that it doesn't jump forward in time by about 40 years, like it's set during the Great Depression, I don't think Publishers Clearinghouse and Ed McMahon would have been handing out giant checks back then.
Yeah, the giant check thing feels pretty modern.
Like, but that's definitely an 80s, 90s trope. So
yeah, exactly. So I think it's kind of a double meta joke of being like, because most people haven't seen The Sting Part 2, they also probably won't know that this scam is not from that movie as well.
Exactly.
So I thought that was pretty clever. Yeah, that's a really good one. Scared Straight. I mean, this is a small one, but when Homer takes Bart to the prison, he says, "I'd like to scare my son straight," right? Which, it feels like a bit of a generic reference in some ways, but that term, I'm pretty sure, is like very heavily associated with this movie and idea.
Oh, wait, so it's actually... See, I just assumed that Scared Straight was like an actual program. I didn't know that it's...
I think it is as well. That's,
okay.
Yeah. But I'm not 100% sure.
I remember the infamous Arrested Development episode, but like I didn't realize that it was actually... There's a film called Scared Straight. So there you go. Okay, so I learned something new today. There.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Jaws. Right. So this is one of those episodes where we talked about this in our Jaws episode where you get the dolly zoom. Right. In fact, you get multiple dolly zooms of Willie's face during the courtroom scene.
Well, now, of course, Nate, we need to acknowledge, because the jackals on the internet would like us to, they're saying we can't say it's Jaws. We have to say it's Vertigo. And you got into it with a couple commenters.
I sure did.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you.
The short version is the Jaws version has a face in the middle of it. And nothing that Hitchcock did has a face in it. It's all sets that are being distorted by the lens. So that's the difference. That's why it goes to Jaws and not to Hitchcock. Exactly. Even though, yes, I know he invented the dolly zoom, or supposedly he and his camera operator invented the dolly zoom.
But that's like saying any movie that uses a pan gets credited to the first movie that uses a pan.
Right.
Like, we're talking about a specific use of the dolly zoom.
Right. The first crane shot has to be credited to some movie from like the teens, the 19 teens. So, we're not going to play that game. So anyway, it looks the most like Jaws. It's just like, look at Willie's face, his shocked face, and then the dolly zoom. It looks like Jaws. What can I say?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Homer says 10-4 Kemosabe in this episode. And Kemosabe I had to look this up, but is the word that Tonto uses to address the Lone Ranger in all of the Lone Ranger media. Yeah. So going back to the radio plays and then like every movie, every short, everything. So the first on-screen depiction of the Lone Ranger that I could find is Hi-Yo Silver, which is a movie from 1940. So there you go. And then this is not a movie reference, but I thought it was pretty funny. And I had to look this one up because I was just like, that seems like a reference to something, but I don't know what it is. Kent Brockman, he's on the phone and when he's about to get scammed by Bart and Homer. And he ends his call by saying, "Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow." This is Chevy Chase's signature sign-off from Weekend Update on SNL.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that feels like, again, that is a Simpsons writer's homage to, other great comedy writers. That feels very in line with something that they would do.
Yeah, totally. But you'll notice I did not say The Sting, which is weird.
Okay.
But this is one of those ones that I would categorize as a mystery reference.
Okay.
And that's because the sort of triple cross ending of this episode where someone there's sort of a fake gunshot wound and, people dying. And then they sort of like break character and reveal what the con was, feels very, very similar to me to the ending of The Sting. However, no one sort of says that like on the commentary, and so it's really hard to know exactly. It's also general enough that like maybe it's just fair to say, well, every con man movie kind of ends with something like this. Yeah,
I mean, you're right. Like so many con movies end with that sort of final reveal or final twist. I think the similarity to The Sting is obviously the gunshot wound and that sort of fake out. But the difference is that in The Sting, the mark doesn't find out that he's been stung, Whereas in the Simpsons episode, they then reveal to the Mark, who is Homer and Bart, that they've been conning them the whole time, or like tricking them, or whatever you want to use. So that's where it sort of
them a lesson.
That's where it sort of differs. But the idea of like, you know, pulling off a con involving a fake, you know, shootout and actors portraying stuff. There's definitely some Sting adjacentness there. So yeah, I think you're right to sort of put it in that like question mark territory. Okay,
well, here's another one for you. The con where Bart tells Dr. Hibbert that his dog is dead, right? And then it cuts to Homer, and he's like walking down the boardwalk with a dog on a leash, and he's got a bell, and he's dressed in kind of an old-timey outfit. Do you think that is a reference to Oliver and the boy for sale thing, or not? Because, you know, it's definitely coded very similar to the other time they make that joke with Skinner trying to sell Jimbo, but it's not a boy, it's a dog. Yeah. And the outfit looks more like something from The Sting rather than something from Oliver. So
yeah, I mean, I immediately when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, dog for sale, boy for sale." Like you make that Oliver like in your mind, whether or not I think it's one of those things where it's like it's not necessarily an intentional like let's reference Oliver, but everybody kind of knows that that's what it's playing, riffing, like it's a riff on that maybe. So again, like to call it an explicit reference, especially because when they do it with Jimbo, Skinner is dressed like Mr. Bumble and like is very clearly looks like a Dickensian workhouse owner versus Homer, as you say, sort of dressed in a old timey like pinstripe suit situation. So yeah, I think it's a question mark situation. Mustache. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so when it's revealed that Grandpa is also a grifter, which again also feels so. Apparently, in the book Paper Moon, the latter half of the book, which they don't include in the movie, they encounter an old grifter who then teaches them how to grift better. Oh, so there's that. But it's also pretty similar to The Sting, right? With this old grifter and the young teaching the young grifter and all of that. So there's a bit of that echo there. It's not really a reference per se, but you know, again, kind of a trope in this genre, maybe. But anyway, so it turns out that he literally wrote the book on grifting, and they find this out when they turn over the book and they see his photo on the back. But in the photo, he kind of, to me, he looks like he's dressed like a member of the Rat Pack, like maybe Sinatra or maybe something else. But I wasn't sure. What did you have a read on what that's supposed to be referencing?
It definitely, I mean, it could be read as that. I think if I were to, I'm going to send this to you in the chat. I think it is also possibly a reference to The Sting. Again, it's that sort of the era of which that film takes place. Yeah, like the fact that he's kind of got like the oversized suit and the fedora hat. I don't know. Like, again, I think it's more just to evoke this sort of 30s era cool mobster gangster kind of look, but it's tough to say exactly obviously what that is intended to be, but it does feel with the other Sting stuff it could be coded as like Sting era.
It's true, although they do often make these references to Sinatra and the Rat Pack and like all of that, and it's in black and white, which kind of also made me feel like maybe it's that. But yeah, I could definitely be convinced that it's more the 30s era Sting sort of vibe. Okay, when they go to the courthouse, there's sort of a stock music cue that they use for courthouse scenes, and there are a lot of courthouse scenes in this like later part of our period, like season 9 through 12. A lot of episodes end at the courthouse, and they have this music cue that's it's like a trumpet music cue. And I don't know what it's from, but it feels like it must be either riffing off of a movie, a TV series, or something like that.
Yeah, I kind of coded it as being like Law and Order adjacent. I feel like, obviously, Law and Order usually uses that chung chung.
Right.
But I think they also sometimes, like, especially if you listen to the opening theme, it's got like this horn vibe to it.
Really?
And so I don't know.
I think of it as being synthy, like ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-bum, bum.
There is, but then there's a second the
oh yeah, okay, maybe.
This is great. This is great radio. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it definitely feels like it's meant to be a riff on like just TV court dramas that maybe we're both not super.
Yeah, I was thinking of Matlock, which is another thing that they often reference. And I listened to the opening theme for Matlock, and it's definitely very trumpet forward, but not quite this vibe. A little bit more like jazzy, maybe even like klezmer sort of stuff. So I have no idea, but it definitely, it's one of those things where when you pin it down, you'll be like, oh, that's totally 100% what it is. We just aren't familiar with it. Okay. And then the very end, the surf rock ending.
Cowabunga!
It's like Lisa's like, there's a very good explanation for all of this. And then Otto just comes into the room and is like, let's all go surfing. Yeah. And then everyone comes back, like the astronauts or the cosmonauts are back, they're all surfing. And then the sturgeon jumps out of the water and winks at the camera. Again,
it's a very season 12 coded.
Absolutely, it's probably the most season 12 coded ending. It sort of epitomizes, I think, what some people are really turned off by in this later season about like just how wacky it got. But yeah, it's like I don't think it's probably referencing anything, but again, maybe just a vibe of like how the sort of beach movies of the 50s might end. But kind of in a more
everything
generic
just wraps
way.
up quickly.
Yeah, wraps up quickly. Everyone goes surfing. You get some surf rock music, which actually is a real song called Pipeline.
Oh, okay.
I found.
There you go.
So yeah, but I leave the door open that maybe that is sort of referencing something more specific, but probably not. Probably not.
Yeah. What else? Is there anything else from the episode that you wanted to sort of unpack or chat about before we move on to the film?
I mean, I was just thinking about how quintessential this episode was of the era. We already talked about some of it, but some of the other things that feel very season 12 is Homer's use of chloroform to just like opt out of a scene where he's like, all right, bye, and it just chloroforms himself. And then at one point it gets swapped out for Mountain Dew inexplicably.
Yep.
That's very season 12.
Yeah, he was big on chloroform for a while there.
Yeah, they had a lot of chloroform jokes, I feel like. I don't know exactly how many. Maybe I'm overstating it in my memory, but it feels like there was a lot of chloroform.
Well, one would argue more than 2 times is a lot.
Right, exactly. Yes, yeah. It became a pattern for sure. Homer's pennant, like when he's sitting in court and he has a pennant that just says justice, also very much like a gag of this era. There's a lot of Homer with a pennant jokes.
Yes.
And then just, the overall, the zany plot of this, I was definitely thinking about. What about you, Adam?
Well, I love, there's a couple of gags I really liked. I love the, leaving the gift shop to enter the additional gift shop. That made me laugh out loud. And then probably one of the funniest moments in the episode is when they're revealing that everybody was in on the gag, and it cuts to Willie, and he's like, "Willie wasn't." And that made me laugh out loud.
Yeah,
too.
that is pretty good.
And then the most like I said, the thing that was most memorable was obviously the Michael Jackson marionette.
Yeah. Okay. So
situation.
What is is there a story there? What is that? Is it just like Michael Jackson? It's like, marionette things are something that you see on the street and then we put Michael Jackson in it, or is that actually a Michael Jackson thing?
Well, this is the thing. So another show that I adore is called Happy Endings. And if you haven't seen Happy Endings, there's only 3 seasons. I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is one of the funniest sitcoms of all time. And I feel like if you like The Simpsons, you probably will like Happy Endings because it's that same sort of like irreverent humor. It's just like I love this show. And in one of the seasons they do a group Halloween costume where they go as the Jackson 5 in that same sort of setup with the like they're all attached. So
maybe it's a Jackson
that's what
5
makes me think that maybe it was a thing that you would see on boardwalks, people doing this. But obviously the joke here is meant to be that it's actually Michael Jackson.
Right.
Like it's not. And so I was trying to like time it out, and I was like, this episode comes out in 2000. His last album was in 95. His final album comes out in 2001. So he's sort of like
winding down.
Again, he's in the public consciousness because he always was, but like he's kind of elusive and not really doing anything at this point. So there is an argument that you could be made that like he's sort of maybe he's washed
Right.
up and this is how he's making money, as like pretending to relive the glory days of the Jackson 5, which again, like it's absurd in just on the face of it, because it's like the man was the biggest celebrity in the world, the likes of which we will never see again. So talking to the monoculture.
Right.
But yeah, so I think it's meant to be like kind of a layered joke, but it is just one of those things that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb now.
Right. Like,
So-
what is this? Is this something is this a reference I just don't get? But yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a good read on it. And just like the marionette thing is just something you'd see at the boardwalk. And then it's kind of a joke about Michael Jackson's current status in pop culture and that kind of thing.
That's my guess, but like and again, obviously the show has a very weird relationship with Michael Jackson.
Right.
So it's like, it's hard to know what the joke is.
Yeah.
But I remember it was one of those things for whatever reason, and because this would have come out when I was in middle school, and we would quote that dig deep brothers. We would quote that a lot for some reason, which is not a funny joke, but
No.
we did quote it a
just
lot.
watching the it's a visual joke, mostly watching the dollar bills slowly float to the ground.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And none of them landing in
Right,
the hat.
right.
It is funny.
Right.
So.
Well, speaking of celebrities, we also have a celebrity guest in this episode, Ed Norton.
Yeah.
Ed Norton playing an actor, playing a grifter, playing an FBI agent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what did you think about Ed?
This is
Our friend Ed.
Devon Bradley, character actor, dancer, singer. I'm a triple threat.
well, it was one of those things that I was like, this is an interesting choice for a guest star.
Right.
And like, again, I had to then put it in context of like, when did this come out? I was like, well, he's been in a bunch of heist movies, so maybe that's why. But at this point, he's only been in like 5 movies.
Wow. Okay.
One of which is obviously Fight
Sure.
Club. Fight Club comes out the year before. So that's like, so he's big.
Yeah.
He's popping.
Right. But that
he's
movie's
been
like
in
not at all
Rounders.
what he plays here. You know, he's such a loser in that movie. So it's like such a different
Yeah. But
direction.
he is in Rounders, which is kind of like it's a card gambling heist kind of movie. But he then goes on to be in a movie literally called Heist. He does the Italian Job remake.
Right.
So like he makes a couple of movies that it's one of these interesting, like Simpsons did it first. They kind of did predict the kind of thing that he would go on to do, but he hasn't done it yet. So it's kind of a weird play, and like I don't know, like he's not great.
I think he's terrible.
Like, he's not terrible.
I think he's
Okay,
terrible.
well, there you go.
There are
Yeah,
a lot of
so-
scenes where it sounds like he's kind of just reading the lines, like, or it was recorded completely separately, which may have been the case, and he's just not like acting against anything, but like particularly the scene where he's driving away from the prison or from the jail, is just awful. It's like it just doesn't read as genuine at all, you know.
I mean, hopefully he's not a listener, but like if you know anything about the history of Edward Norton's career, you know that he's challenging to work with, is maybe putting it generously.
Right.
And apparently, this is the other thing. He was in the Simpsons movie. But they cut him and redubbed him with Dan Castellaneta for reasons that I've never really gotten to the bottom of. But he had he played 2 roles. He plays I don't know if you remember in the Simpsons movie, but there's when the dome is coming down, there's like a panicky guy and he can't decide if he wants to be inside the dome or outside the dome. That was originally voiced by Ed Norton.
Just randomly.
And then he also did a Woody Allen impression, and he played a character called Woodsy Allen.
Right.
Which
Marge calls him that on the show. Yeah,
exactly. So, then that scene was obviously cut. So I don't know if they were like, well, we've cut his main cameo, so let's just remove his other tiny little voice cameo, so we don't have to pay him, or I don't know. But like I do know, they mentioned that on the Simpsons movie commentary that yes, like Edward Norton did a cameo, but it's no longer in the movie, and that's like they don't get into why.
Yeah.
So
take from that what you will.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting.
I mean, so one other like factoid from the commentary that maybe ties into like why Ed Norton is that originally the script was supposed to be a pool hustling script. So they weren't con men, they were like they got into pool. Which actually I'm not sure if they've done that like subsequently. And so, maybe that's still out there as a possibility. But yeah, obviously then that would be riffing more on The Hustler and Color of Money, probably, I would assume.
Yeah.
But that's kind of more adjacent
sort of align
to
better with Rounders. Yeah.
So I could see that being maybe the thought process, and maybe they were pursuing that in tandem. Who the hell knows, right? With these timelines, it's hard to say, but interesting.
I will say, though, I watched Rounders within the last year.
Same.
I think I watched it on a plane. Great movie.
Yeah,
great movie.
It's pretty damn good. It's if you like that kind of movie, it like really hits the spot. It really hits the spot.
Yeah, it's really good. Oh, well, speaking of movies, should we tuck into the Paper Moon, or is there anything else you wanted to cover?
Two short things, and then yes, one.
Okay.
So she was made of chimps. Just a great line from Homer. And then one more thing, the Albany ham scam. Do you think that's a reference to steam hams?
I'm going to say no.
Really?
Just because at this point...
It wasn't a thing, I guess. Yeah, that's true.
I could be off base, but I don't think steamed hams has become the meme that it now is for them to make a callback to.
That's true.
I think it's probably more just a, the fact that it's Albany is like interesting, but
it is. You could call what Skinner does to Chalmers the Albany ham scam. Like that actually does describe like what he does to him. So I was sort of like maybe, but yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's like that wasn't a beloved joke at the time, and not a beloved episode in the same way, or maybe it's just starting to get that status online. But like it's before it was memed. So that's a good point.
It could be one of those things that like Albany, the writers just think is a funny.
Yes.
For them to keep referencing Albany means like there's clearly something there that we're not getting, and it could just be that sort of. Like,
I get it.
East Coast liberal.
Yeah, it's an upstate New York joke, right? Like Albany and Syracuse, and just these kind of like this. I mean, no offense to the people of Albany, but Albany is just a little dull. I mean, it's a state capital, but a lot of state capitals are pretty dull. So I think it's kind of...
New York City is not the capital of New York?
I believe not. Am I just talking out of my ass?
This is an Ottawa, Toronto situation where everyone's like, really? Ottawa?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well...
No disrespect to Ottawa.
Okay, you made me second guess myself. Yes, Albany is the capital of New York State. And yes, it is...
Although Ottawa is the nation's capital, not Ontario's capital, so it's not really
right. But actually, like most, or not, maybe not most, a lot of U.S. states have some kind of weird capital that is like not necessarily the biggest city, and was just kind of like either created to be the capital or like designated the capital for other reasons. Maybe it just had a lot of space. They're like, we can build some like a state capital there, but I think especially the newer states don't necessarily. They didn't have a big obvious city like Providence, Rhode Island, where it's like, yeah, of course that's the capital. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, on that note, let's dig into Peter Bogdanovich's Paper Moon. Nate, how would you sum this movie up in a sentence?
I mean, I think it's pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
So, a young girl and a man who may or may not be her father bond over conning strangers.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I think that absolutely nails
I think that's kind of the whole, that is actually the whole plot of this movie, really. Like,
there's not much more to it.
It's very episodic otherwise. So, yeah.
Well, that being said, the 1995 Paramount Directors Series Laserdisc certainly had more to say, which is where I pulled the synopsis from here. And here's how they describe Paper Moon. Paper Moon is a film as beguiling as any ever made.
Wow.
Sure.
Bold claim.
Ryan O'Neal plays Moses Prey, a smooth-talking con man in 1930s Kansas who sells Bibles to widows. Traveling with him is Addie, Oscar winner Tatum O'Neal, the orphan daughter of Moses' one-time girlfriend. I don't think girlfriend is how we're meant to describe her.
One night stand,
okay.
at least.
Yeah, I think she's lady of the night, but Addie's journey is supposed to end at her aunt's house in Missouri, but clever Addie has other ideas. She thinks Moses may be her father. We got the same jaw. And when Trixie Delight, Madeline Kahn, joins them and begins to win over Moses, well, Addie could never let that happen.
weird to elevate. I mean, I think they were just like, we have to get Madeline Kahn in here somehow.
Yeah, we have to reference.
But it's like, it's weird to elevate that plot line because it kind of happens in the middle of the movie and resolves before the climax.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it. It's my least favorite part of the movie. But yeah, it's as you say, it's a very sort of episodic film with a very simple premise. It's like need to transport. It is essentially like an escort mission in a video game. Like you need to get person A to place Z. Everyone's
favorite kind of mission in a video game. Except in this one, your escort, the person you're escorting, maybe not your escort, the person you're escorting is actually really useful and actually maybe better at the video game than you are.
Well, I don't think there's any disputing that. But
well, Adam, how did this movie come to be?
Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. Peter Bogdanovich obviously has made 3 movies at this point. He's made Targets, which is everybody kind of forgets about it because it's this small little Roger Corman movie. I believe even like I forgot about Targets when I was adding this up, and then I like did the math and I was like, oh wait, I gotta include that. So, but of course his breakout hit, The Last Picture Show, followed by What's Up, Doc, which we have covered on the show, and then he makes this. Like, this is the crazy thing. This is only his 4th movie. It is
crazy.
But, so he's made those 3 movies. He's very, very hot. And Paramount has this idea that they want to adapt this book, Addie Pray, and they come to Peter Bogdanovich and say, hey, do you want to make this? And he's like, no. He had been working on a large-scale Western with John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart. Or at least that's who he was intending to cast in it. Because he finishes the script, and John Wayne ultimately like turns it down.
Isn't that the same cast as The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance?
I think that's like intentional. Okay. Like he's basically wanting to, because the thing again, remember, like Bogdanovich is a former actor and then film critic who's obsessed with like 1920s and 30s Hollywood. Like he's best friends with Orson Welles, so he's constantly trying to like bring all of that flavor back in the 1970s. Like while most other filmmakers are pushing back against classic Hollywood and trying to do stuff that's new and sort of subversive, Bogdanovich is very much leaning into that.
He's kind of like a proto-film brat or movie brat.
Exactly.
In terms of like his relationship to previous movies.
Yeah, I mean, like, What's Up, Doc is a screwball comedy that pays a great homage to Bringing Up Baby and all this stuff. Like, that was sort of his shtick at the time. So this movie falls through, and he now finds himself like without anything to do. And Paramount's like, what about Addie Pray? And he's still like, I don't know that I want to do this. And so he consults with Polly Platt. I believe at this time they may or may not still be married. I think they're not married.
No, I'm pretty sure they're not.
He has the affair on Last Picture Show, so they've sort of split up, but they're still working together. They're still like very close collaborators. And she's like, look, you have 2 daughters. It might be interesting for you to like tackle a father-daughter story. And he's like, that's a good idea. So he ends up deciding he's going to do it, but not without some changes. This is interesting. This is a little sidebar. It's produced by a company called the Directors Company, which was run by Peter Bogdanovich, Francis Ford Coppola, and William Friedkin.
Oh, wow.
So again, if you're talking about 70s Hollywood, early 70s Hollywood, it's like
a small world.
The big 3 outside of Scorsese, like you literally have the big 3. The only movies they made, however, were this, then The Conversation, and then this movie called Daisy Miller, which flopped, and so Friedkin never got to make a movie for them.
Poor Friedkin.
But the craziest part of this, and this is the only reason I bring this up, is that Coppola had the option to produce Star Wars because he's friends with Lucas. And so he brings the script to Bogdanovich and Friedkin, and they're like, no, we don't want to do this. This we're not.
It's not the type of old thing that they're interested in reviving.
Exactly. And this is the thing that everybody forgets. It's like Star Wars, when people are trying to sell, like, these never do good. Nobody's going to go see this movie. Like, what are you talking about? A sci-fi space opera?
Well, and it's super dated at the time, and not in a nostalgic way. Not in a way. There's like some small subset of filmmakers that are like, yeah, you remember those crazy serials, like that kind of thing. But like, you know, the things that Peter Bogdanovich is sort of drawing on are like the well-remembered, well-respected things of Hollywood of that era, not the sort of like schlocky
B movies. Yeah. So, but it's just hilarious to think that like this company folds because their last movie flops and it's a disaster. But it's like, had they produced Star Wars, the whole course of history could have changed. So crazy. So it's just, again, anytime you think about like, we now think of Star Wars as like this multi-billion-dollar, success story. But it's important to always remember in context that like everybody thought that movie was going to tank.
Right. Up until basically it was like completely done in the form that it was released in theaters. Everyone was like, this is not looking good.
Yeah, even at first previews, it was like, this thing is going to tank. And then Marshall Lucas saves it. But anyway, back to Paper Moon. So Platt sort of suggests as well. She seems to be the unsung hero of a lot of these early Bogdanovich movies. But she says, like, let's move it from the South to the Midwest. I think that will resonate more with people. And so they then also made a bunch of changes to Alvin Sargent's script. Bogdanovich is quoted as saying, Alvin, it's a good script. It just needs a total rewrite.
That's a classic Bogdanovich.
Yeah, exactly. And according to a seminar that he gave at the AFI in the mid-'70s, he claims the only two scenes from the original script that they kept were the cafe scene and the scene on the hill with Trixie.
Which are two of the best scenes in the movie, arguably.
Yeah, they're great scenes. But Bogdanovich basically said, like, these two scenes are so good that I know I can fill in the rest of the gaps. I just, like, if I keep those things, I can make everything else work. And it's interesting. You can find a copy of the final draft of the script online. And it is interesting to sort of see, even from that final draft to when they started shooting, they still made a bunch more changes, including completely changing the ending, which we'll get to. But it's just, it is sort of interesting to see how this movie keeps like evolving. And again, that's the final draft. So they've already gone back and rewritten it a bunch.
Yeah.
So, but I did want to ask you, Nate, does the name Alvin Sargent ring any bells to you?
No, not really.
So he actually is an uncredited writer on Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and a credited writer on the next two movies. Like he worked on the Spider-Man.
That's so random. I mean, just can't think of two more different properties, I guess.
No, but I know, and that's
those movies are really human movies. Like that's one of the reasons they work so well is actually like the characters and the dialogue that is very I'm going to come back, I guess, character driven. That's not very descriptive, but you know what I'm saying. Like it's coming from a human place and not like a comic book, like surface level sort of place. And that's what made them, so different and still makes them different when you compare them to like today's movies. Maybe that's a little bit of him.
I thought that was exactly. I think that's why I wanted to bring it up because I was like, oh, that's an interesting little parallel. Like you can kind of, once you know that, you're like, oh, I guess I could kind of see some of that. So anyway, Bogdanovich notes in the commentary track that they only used about half the book. Basically, the entire second half of the book, they just threw out. They really didn't. He wasn't interested in any of that stuff. Like they as you mentioned earlier, there's like allegedly this old grifter that they get tied up with, but then also Addie ends up going back to her aunts, and like that's sort of the back half of the novel is like her living with her.
And they like there's like a longer grift with like an old dowager or something that
so he's just like, let's just focus this on the relationship between her and Moses. The other thing is, of course, he didn't like the title of the book for the movie. Like, the Paramount wanted to call it Addie Pray, and he's like, that's a terrible title. We're not calling it that.
Which he's right about. It doesn't, like, to an outsider, it doesn't mean anything. Not that Paper Moon necessarily does, but...
Well, so this is what's interesting. So he finds this old song from the period by Harold Allen, who... Harold Allen is probably best known as writing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the greatest movie song ever written. And again, Bogdanovich in his, he's so, we're probably going to talk about this, but he's so about making everything feel grounded and realistic. Like this movie has no score. All of the music is diegetic and it's all music of the period. So he finds this period song called Only a Paper Moon. And he's like, that's a good title. Let's use that. And he goes to Paramount and he says, I'm changing the title. We're going to call it Paper Moon. And they're like, what the hell? What does that even mean? And he's like, look, I don't know, but it's better than Addie Pray. And they're like, Addie Pray was a best-selling novel. And his retort, I love this. He's like, well, how many copies did it sell? And they go, 100,000 in hardcover. And he goes, oh, if we get 100,000 people to see this movie, I guess it'll be a big hit. And they're like, okay, fair enough. Shut up. Okay, fine. We'll change the title.
Yeah, 100,000 is not quite enough.
Like,
no. Yeah, no. I mean, and when you listen to the lyrics of the song, right, which plays at the very, very beginning of this movie, you're like, I get it. I 100% get it because it's all about playing pretend, right? And that's what this movie's all about is like, obviously the cons, right? on the surface, but also again, we'll get into this, but the relationship between Addie and Moses is kind of a fake it till you make it, right? Where it's like, he insists that he's not her father. And yet through this sort of, this conning and all of that kind of stuff, they kind of begrudgingly create a father-daughter relationship, right? Whether or not he is her father. So like, that's also, it's a perfect title. It resonates so thematically with everything that the movie's about. If you think about it for 2 seconds,
Yeah, and it's a much more memorable title than Addie.
Yeah,
right? Like it's just that is.
I don't really like titles that are character names in general. I find them kind of, I don't know, just forgettable. They don't tell you a whole lot about what you're actually getting into.
Yeah. And we're obviously not alone in this assessment, because then Peter Bogdanovich runs it by his old friend Orson Welles, who says that title is so good you shouldn't even bother making the picture. Just release the title, which is a very Orson thing
very Orson Welles. Oh God, I can't. Can you imagine just hanging out with Orson Welles and Peter Bogdanovich? Like crazy.
I literally, like, I think, when they say, like, if you could go back to one point in time in history, like, I just think getting drunk with Orson Welles and eating with Orson Welles would be, like, the coolest.
Yeah, and you could do it at any time of day with him. Sorry. Yep. Mean joke.
Hey, you know what? Look, the man's a genius.
Absolutely.
I've been digging into a bunch more Orson Welles lately, like the stuff that I'm, obviously Citizen Kane and a bunch, but I've been sort of tucking into his other work. And there's a reason people are like, he's the greatest filmmaker of all time. It's insane how talented that guy was in the face of, because basically every movie after Citizen Kane was essentially taken away from him.
Right.
And, he doesn't actually get to execute his vision, and they're still stunning. So it's crazy. But we're not talking about Orson Welles today. So last couple things. Movie was shot on location in St. Joe, Missouri.
Which is where they're going in the movie. That's where her aunt lives, right?
So it's going to be... And we'll talk more about that, but I think it's important to like contextualize that basically the whole movie is shot on location. And this was, I thought, really interesting. He claims that they basically cut the picture in camera as they went. So essentially, they decided what dialogue was going to be used in each shot, and then they would shoot it up until the point they finished that dialogue, and then they would move on. Now, I guess if they had to do multiple takes, they'd obviously do multiple takes, but he says like there's no deleted scenes.
Yep.
There are outtakes like when they screwed stuff up, but basically, editing the picture was relatively straightforward because it's just like, it's right there. To that point, they finished shooting 4 days under schedule. Allegedly, it's because he was Polly Platt and him were not getting along because of the divorce, and so he's just like, I gotta get this over with so I don't have to hang out with my ex-wife. But they had an edit ready to show executives 3 weeks after the movie wrapped, which is crazy.
I mean,
especially at that time.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too about editing in camera, as he says, is then the studio has no way to change the movie. That's, I think, the main
this is another
is like, even if they don't like what you did, they don't have anything to change it with, except for asking for reshoots, which is way more expensive. And so it's a way of kind of protecting your vision, even if you don't have final cut.
There's a couple filmmakers that sort of have done that trick. I think maybe Welles did that too on one movie. I can't remember, but yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if he learned it from Welles, right? I mean,
but it requires you to have a very, very clear vision, like to not shoot coverage, to not shoot anything beyond what you need. I don't think a lot of filmmakers could actually pull it off. Like,
and we've gone in the opposite direction of that, partly because everything is cheaper. It's like, it's way cheaper to get coverage now and to just like shoot a ton of footage and then just cut it back. And so we've kind of gone in the opposite direction from that.
Soderbergh could do it, but that's because he also like shoots and edits his own movies.
Right.
So he's like, he really knows exactly what he needs. So it wouldn't surprise me to find out that he's someone who does that. But yeah, I just like, I think of a lot of the great filmmakers working today, and it's like none of them would do that.
For
none
sure.
of them would be able to pull that off. So the budget was about $2.5 million. So, at the time, that's pretty, not insignificant, but not like crazy. And it made $31 million at the box office, which according to IMDb, that's about $92 million in like today's dollars. So like pretty good return on your investment. And like when you consider what this movie is, which is a black and white heist comedy starring father-daughter, like
it's weird.
That's making some good
totally.
Money.
Well, on that note, I noticed you didn't have this in our notes yet, so I took the liberty of pulling the top 10 movies of 1973.
Okay.
So I'm curious if you're able to do this because there's definitely some stuff in here that I think you'll know. But first of all, do you think this hit the top 10?
31 million. I'm going to say no, or if it did, it was right at the tail end.
Okay.
Like 9 or 10.
So, yeah, it is actually number 9 on this list.
Okay, there you go.
So that gives you something that you can kind of peg the others against a little bit here. But you're exactly right. It was like near the tail end of the top 10. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say number 1, or at least the top 3, because I'm pretty sure we've covered this era. The Exorcist is going to be in.
Yes. So The Exorcist is number 1.
Okay, that's what I thought. Now I'm trying to remember: is Rocky 73 or 75? Am I off base?
It's not this year. I'm pretty sure it's 74 or 75. Well, think about what other types of movies are coming out in this era, because you will start thinking, I think, along the right lines.
Right. Can you give me a hint? Is there like a crime picture?
Yes, there is a crime picture. In fact, there's a crime picture in this that is probably the most Adam shit ever, and is also something that we've already talked about in this episode.
Oh. The
Sting. That's number 2.
Okay, yeah, great movie.
Great movie.
Okay. So we got that, The Exorcist, The Sting. Man, 1973.
Okay, I'll give you another hint.
Give me another
There's
hint.
A movie on this list that you have recommended on this podcast, and you actually did it in the very first episode.
Oh, is it a James Bond movie? Okay. 73.
Do you remember what I asked you on the very first episode?
No.
Okay, so I asked you, this is clearly a bad Bond movie. If you had to recommend a bad Bond movie, what would you recommend?
Or
not bad, but kind of campy, I guess.
It's the first Roger Moore. It's Live and Let Die.
Live and Let Die. Live and Let Die is number 7 on the list.
Okay. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull the rest without hints, and at the interest of keeping things moving. Yeah. So I got a couple. So I'm proud of myself.
So number 3, we have another sort of I guess we'll get into this, but nostalgic pick, which is American Graffiti, but a different era, not the 30s, but the 50s, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
A movie which I don't.
Number 4, I got to give you the hint on this one, is a prison camp escape movie starring Steve McQueen.
That's not The Great Escape.
It's not The Great Escape.
I have no idea.
It's called Papillon. But it is the same damn movie. It's just like a different location and a slightly different setup. I think it has Dustin Hoffman in it maybe as well. But it's a prison escape movie starring Steve McQueen. Good. I was like, really? Okay. We got The Way We Were, which gave its title to a famous Simpsons episode, of course. The Way We Was. Magnum Force, which is a sequel to Dirty Harry.
I was gonna guess Dirty Harry, but yeah, so I'm not surprised there's a Dirty Harry.
We've got Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood, which is a movie that my clue for that was that it has given a lot of people a sexual awakening because of a certain red fox at the middle of the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And then lastly, we have Serpico, another classic 70s cop movie,
which I've never seen.
Me neither.
It's literally been on my watch list for like years because I love Sidney Lumet. I love cop movies. I love 70s Pacino. And I haven't. It's because it's like 2 hours and 20 minutes, I think. So I've just like never actually sit down. But maybe I'm gonna have to cross that off my list these coming months.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the film was a critical success and has gone on to, sort of withstand the test of time, become a sort of critical darling. Goes on to receive 4 Oscar nominations. And this is interesting, though. So it's 2 for Best Supporting Actress.
Right.
1 for Madeline Kahn and 1 for Tatum O'Neal. Although, basically, you talk to anyone, everyone's like, Tatum O'Neal should have gotten Best Actress. There's no way that is a supporting role. She's the reason the picture works.
Yes.
But they're not going to let a
child,
an 8-year-old, be nominated for Best Actress. She obviously ends up winning. And then it was also Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound. This is sort of an interesting, just to sort of put you in the mind of the people involved in this. Bogdanovich doesn't get a nomination, so he opts not to attend the ceremony. And he says, I was watching from home, and obviously I did, had I known that Tatum was going to win, maybe I would have actually gone. But Ryan O'Neal also was pissed off that he didn't get nominated, so he didn't attend.
Yeah.
Then his daughter wins, and it causes a rift in the relationship for years. And of course, you will be unsurprised to discover that the rift was not because Daddy didn't show up, but because my damn kid won an Oscar and I wasn't even nominated. And those guys have, if you want to tuck into some messed up family history, read about the Olympics. It is dark.
Truly awful. And it sounds like it even sort of started on set, like there was already some bad stuff going on, and allegedly Ryan O'Neal actually punched Tatum when he found out that she was nominated. Yes. So very bad stuff. Very bad stuff.
Very bad stuff. But it's similarly very bad stuff. There was a TV spinoff series starring a young Jodie Foster that aired on ABC in 1974.
Interesting.
So a year later. Lasts only a year. And fun fact, it aired on CBC up here in Canada. And it's interesting because it was shot in color. And boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
Does it really emphasize that black and white was the right call for the film?
True. And, although, I mean, of course it was shot in color, right? It's like one of those things where it's like TV at the time, it's like black and white in the 70s would be like, oh, that's old. I don't want to watch that.
Yeah.
But like...
And we'll unpack why the black and white, but like when you see this in color, it really sort of solidifies that, Bogdanovich made the right call by shooting the film in black and white. So... and the last thing I'll say before we sort of unpack everything is that Bogdanovich is quoted as saying, "Paper Moon is more the way I wanted it than any picture I had made up until that time." Now, granted, there's only 3 other movies, but still, it's just interesting that he kind of says that this is the one that got closest to his vision, despite the fact that he didn't even want to make it to begin with. So, and maybe that's part of it, right? Like he was a little more distanced to the material. I don't know, but I just think that's kind of interesting. So.
Cool. Well, shall we dive in?
Yeah, where should we start? I think maybe the best place is to unpack the whole nostalgia element of the film.
I have a question for you, I guess, which is, okay, so as we've established, this came out the same year as The Sting, right? So there is this sort of like con man thing floating out there. They're both period pieces. Yeah. I think they actually literally take place in the same year. So it's like, one of those situations where you have 2 movies kind of doing the same thing at the same time, all of that. But like the 70s was this kind of time where you had all of this revival stuff coming, right? Like all of this nostalgia around the 20s, the 30s, the 50s, right? Like obviously we talked about American Graffiti too. You have Grease, you have all that stuff. You have a bunch of stuff for the 20s and 30s. You have Bob Fosse, right? And his love of like, the sort of stage craft of that era, right? Burlesque and vaudeville and all of that kind of stuff is coming back in the 70s. And I actually think it's interesting with thinking about this in the context of The Simpsons. The Simpsons also is very much like kind of nostalgic for the 70s because that's when a lot of the writers grew up. And then by extension, also kind of nostalgic about the 20s and the 30s, right? There's so much like hobo stuff, so much vaudeville and burlesque, right? Like in The Simpsons. And I kind of wonder if it's partly because they internalized this nostalgia wave of the 70s when they were kids watching TV and movies in the 70s. So anyway, that's kind of a whole other thing. But I guess my question is, can we read this, is Bogdanovich being nostalgic in making this movie or not? Or is it just a period piece that, is just, it takes place in a certain era, but it's not coming from a place of nostalgia?
So Bogdanovich very, very explicitly wanted to avoid nostalgia. There's a great quote that he says, "It doesn't feel dated because it's pre-dated. It's like a pre-shrunken shirt." He wanted the film to almost feel like it was lifted out of the era it was made, that it was a period piece, that you're watching this sort of, you've uncovered this document from the 30s. And that's why a lot of the choices, and we'll talk about a lot of these choices, were made. He chose black and white because he's like, A, it just sort of settles you into that time period. And B, it allows it to not feel nostalgic. If you were to which
is interesting.
Is this funny thing of like, because, you know, photos from the era would have been black and white,
right,
not in color. But he's like, if you were to have it in color, it would give it this patina of feeling overly sentimental and nostalgic. And he wanted it to feel kind of gritty and realistic and grounded. And
like The Sting is a perfect example of what he's getting at.
Yes.
Right. Which is like, it is in color, and it totally, like, the, you know, it's got this sort of like warm, old-fashioned palette, lots of like browns, and, you know, and it feels nostalgic, right? It really feels that way.
Well, it's also one of the sort of interesting comparisons, and it's why I brought it up earlier. The Sting is famously shot on the back lot. So it feels like a studio movie, whereas this is very intentionally shot on location.
Right.
And it adds, again, it gives the film this added layer of reality, because everything, like, yes, they had to dress some of the interior, but like, so one of the things they said is that Platt, basically all of the interiors had to be dressed, but all the exteriors are real. Like, they maybe would like put up a sign here or there, like when they're in the cafe, they put up a fake movie theater across the street so they could put up a period accurate sign and period accurate film. But otherwise, like, everything is kind of just as it was.
Yeah.
And that helps sort of ground you in this reality and makes it not feel artificial, which I love The Sting, but like, you can see the artifice of The Sting.
Oh, totally. They're just,
and that's part of its charm.
They're just trying to do two different things, right?
Yeah. But I think that it is interesting, to your point of like, this is a period where, and nostalgia's cyclical, like we're kind of in the same period, and 90s certainly was nostalgic for like 60s sitcoms and all that stuff, and like that's why you got Mission Impossible and The Shadow and all that shit. So it is interesting though that it's coming out at a time where everything is so nostalgia heavy, and the director is explicitly saying, I wanted to avoid that, and here's how.
Yeah. And I, you know, the black and white, I think part of what he's thinking of is like you said, photos of real life from that period would have been in black and white. News is still often in black and white. Like, if you're reading the newspaper, all of that. There's also like realist photographers of the period that were trying to depict the Depression, like those types of things. That's all in black and white. And so I think he's kind of drawing from that, and that's the sort of truthiness that he's trying to get at. The other thing I would say, though, is, you know, like the other movie we've covered on this podcast, which is What's Up, Doc, is so nostalgic and so explicitly nostalgic. And Bogdanovich as a director is a nostalgic director.
Yeah, I know. That's what's so odd.
Like, I can tell that he is clearly trying to kind of separate that from this movie and reflect something that's a little bit more real. And I think the dialogue and the acting in this is reflective of a previous era of film in a way that is a little bit nostalgic. And I think it's okay that those things intermingle. I don't think that they're actually at war with each other in this movie, but I do think that there's sort of an old-fashionedness to the comedy in this, for example.
100%.
That like is definitely, there is artifice there. And it's not like Raging Bull, for example, where it's just like, it just feels like you're watching two people fight. Like, like not in the ring, but out of the ring, like watching two people have an argument in their home, like, and you're invading their privacy. It feels like a script that's written, and it's clever, and it's, you know, witty, and there are callbacks, and like there's all that kind of stuff, and it's so fast paced, right? Like, in a way that people just aren't that able to think on the fly.
Bogdanovich's intention may not to be nostalgic, but I don't necessarily think he succeeds, in the sense that it does have a feeling of nostalgia, but I think it's a different kind of feeling that is maybe more successful. It's this weird, and the best way I can describe it is that when I watch it, I get that feeling of the time and place it's meant to be hearkening back to. And it's kind of like when I watch A Christmas Story. I love A Christmas Story, even though it doesn't reflect the era I grew up in. It doesn't reflect my Christmases in any way, shape, or form. And yet it does, when I watch it, I feel like, oh, I'm watching home movies from my family.
Right.
So it's this weird thing of like, I get the feeling that it's putting me in. Whereas when I watch something like American Graffiti, I'm like, I have no relationship to this time period. I have no relationship or fondness for this era or anything that's happening on screen. and then therefore the film doesn't work for me because it's trying to capture a feeling that I've never experienced. So it's this interesting that is intentionally capturing nostalgia, and if you don't have that nostalgia, it doesn't work. This is not intentionally capturing nostalgia, and yet I feel nostalgic watching it. So it's this weird dynamic.
And I think part of the difference, I think, is who the audience is for. Like, just taking those two movies you described, it's like American Graffiti is very clearly targeted to boomers, right? It's like that's who the audience is. It's not their kids who where they're trying to be like, this is how my childhood was.
Yeah.
It's sort of saying like, hey, don't you remember when you were young and you were like, cruising and then do you remember all those things that happened afterwards?
Yeah.
Wasn't that crazy? Like it's that, right? And whereas A Christmas Story, it's a story that's being told to you. Yeah. And so it's kind of, again, pre-shrunk, right? Pre-aged, where it's like they're telling you about it as a story that person experienced. Yeah. And that lens kind of helps you contextualize it in a different way where you're not like, I didn't experience that as a kid. I'm not feeling any connection to this.
It's funny. I also can't help but think about That 70s Show, which is a show that we adore, and was a huge sort of like The Simpsons and That 70s Show were sort of like the two cultural things that we bonded in our sort of, early years growing up. And That 70s Show is such a fascinating piece because it's like my parents watched it and they loved it because it reflected their youth. And our generation loved it because it kind of explained how our parents became the people that they were, and like is sort of like I'm getting a taste of my parents' life, even though my parents were nothing like those characters. But it was just this weird thing of like, but also it still captures the feeling of youth and being a teenager, even though it's set in the 70s, it still feels relevant to us in the 2000s, and so it kind of works on both levels, and that's what
they were relatable as people that were recognizable to us at that age. Even though they were living in a different era. And to bring it back to this movie, I feel like it's interesting. Like it maybe because it's like a little bit further back. Like it clearly doesn't feel like the audience for this movie is people who lived through this era. And it's like being like, don't you remember when you were in the Depression? It's like definitely not that, which is very much the vibe of American Graffiti.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, you're right. It doesn't bother me that like it's kind of leaning into that different era. It doesn't make me feel like, oh, I don't have any connection to this. And maybe it is much like that 70s show, like the weird comparison, but it is about the fact that the characters feel so recognizable today. And today meaning 2025, but today meaning the 1970s when this came out as well. They just feel like people that are living in a different era, but like are as fully realized as someone you might meet on the street today. And maybe that's a little bit like where the difference is from The Sting, which very much does feel like, wow, check out their outfits, right? Check out that set. Oh my God, it looks so good. And like, it's just so cool. And this movie is not aiming for cool, I don't think.
Yeah, I agreed. So again, I want to sort of talk about Bogdanovich as a director, because I think it's just like some of the choices he makes are just fascinating. And like, again, really watching it, I was like, man, this guy was good. And it starts right off the bat. And it's the storytelling through actions. A perfect example of that is right in the opening scene when we're introduced to Moses and he's coming to the funeral and he grabs flowers from another gravestone and then walks up and presents them as if he had bought them and brought them. And that kind of tells us everything we need to know about this guy immediately. Like that he's... And
even before he does that, you hear his shitty car coming down the way. You hear the like backfiring car, which comes back later in the movie, but it's sort of the announcement of, again, as you're saying, who this guy is like he drives a crappy car. He has to steal flowers in order to show any kind of like real thought, I guess.
But he knows that that's what he has to do. Like he's not thoughtless. It's just like he doesn't have the means or didn't think ahead or whatever. And like
it is opportunistic. Like he realizes in the moment that that's something he should do.
Yes,
but it's not like it doesn't seem like he came to the graveyard thinking that's what he was going to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like. He's not thinking ahead. Like you said, it just tells you so much about his character.
In the first
on multiple levels.
2 minutes of the movie without a single line of dialogue. And
Totally.
another great example of this, and this is one of those changes that Bogdanovich made, was the first time we sort of see the grift. And so we see him go to the widow's house and try to sell her the Bible. And as we're seeing it entirely subjectively through Addie's eyes. And this was apparently like two scenes that he realized he could combine into one. And so he we see it from Addie's point of view. We see her discovering the Bibles. We see her making the connection of like, wait, that's the name that's in the paper. Oh, now he's saying the name. Oh, he's a con man. He's conning this lady. And again, without actually explicitly, exposition or
no
anything,
word spoken about it.
We now completely understand this is what this guy does. He's shady, kind of likable though, and this is going to be the relationship between. She's in on the con now. How is this going to all play out?
Yeah, and there's a great moment in that scene, as you say. It's all from Tatum's perspective, basically, or Addie's perspective, I should say. And but there's this one shot right where he walks up to the door, and it's from her perspective, and she sort of peers up over the car door. And you in her shoes, like the camera is actually looking up over the door, which is like one of those perfect filmic moments where your body language changes. Like you feel like you want to kind of like look up and over. So it's just super visceral, but like puts you in the shoes of this young girl who's kind of, as you say, trying to figure out what's going on.
And he does this a couple times throughout the movie. When they go to the rich lady's house, and we see her look, and she sees like the piano, and then she looks up and she sees the chandelier, and then she sees the ring. But it's always from her point of view. Like they bring the camera a little bit lower so that it's at it's at the height of an 8-year-old or whatever. And he says, one of the things he said in the commentary is like, this puts us in her head, but it also helps us avoid a bunch of dialogue we don't need to hear. Because he recognizes like we can speed things up and just sort of like and it puts you, because ultimately, again, this is why she should not be nominated for Best Supporting Actress. It's Addie's story. This is Addie's story. So it makes sense to be in her head. But at the same time, he also will have these like extremely long takes, which like, a lot of people were even saying to him, like, why are you doing this? There's a scene where they're driving down the road and they kind of have a monologue. And he says, like, we basically had 1 kilometer of uninterrupted road where there was no like anachronistic stuff in the set or whatever. And she kept screwing it up. And they shot for a full day and they didn't get a single take. I'm
sure Ryan O'Neal loved that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it ended up taking like 35 takes or whatever over 2 days, and they finally get it. And they're like, why don't you just cut? And he says, there's a certain amount of tension when you don't cut, both in a dramatic sense and in a comedic sense. And so he really understands that the use of the oneers in this is not about like showing off. It's about creating that tension of like the audience doesn't know when it's going to cut, when it's going to break. It causes you to lean in closer and closer, and it really engages you with what's happening on screen. Less so in a way that when the oneer is normally used, which I feel like, yes, I find a oneer impressive, but most of the time it just sort of feels like masturbatory and like, look at us, we're doing a oneer.
It's about announcing the director and like the director's role or maybe the cinematographer's role or both in the making of the film, and that's definitely not what he's doing here. There are a couple moments where it's a little showy. Like there's a great moment early on where you see the car kind of like driving down the street towards you, and then it kind of pulls up next to the camera, and the camera pans into a perfect 2-shot of them inside the car.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's impressive. Like it's just like it's seamlessly done. And I was thinking about Spielberg, again,
totally
with this of just like how well blocked that was, and that you can transition from this long shot that's showing the scenery into this 2-shot of 2 characters like fairly close up is impressive, and it requires thought in order to do that. But most of the sort of long takes in this are actually about the acting and the characters, and not about the direction and cinematography.
Well, and he calls out in the commentary, there's the scene where they're in the hotel, and Tatum is on the bed, and Ryan is he's confronting her and yelling at her, and he's moving in and out of the frame, but the whole time she's very still and he's very manic. And he's like, again, this is if we're cutting, you're not going to get that same sort of dichotomy between their two energies. You need to just do it in a single wide shot oneer, so that the
Right.
comedy comes out of the fact that she is 8, but she's totally reserved, like she's totally in control, and he's a grown ass adult, and he's like spiraling out, and like
Right.
So again, it's always, I feel like for the most part, it's being used as a means of storytelling or character development, and less about just like the practical showiness of it all.
Yeah. Well, and I think the interesting thing too is that, going back to this question of nostalgia, that feels very modern to me, right? It's not using the language of studio filmmaking to tell the story. It's doing something that does feel very 70s.
Yeah.
Right? Of this kind of like emphasis on realism and acting and all of that, rather than the kind of like, glossy close-up of this movie star, and then you cut to another glossy close-up of a movie star, and it kind of bounces back and forth in a way that's very easy to deal with and easy to cut and easy to all of that. These, as you say, it's like this takes tons of takes to get this one shot right. And it is you really have to rely on the actors to nail it, even if it takes them a little time to do it. So it's interesting.
And then speaking of tons of takes, the interrogation scene at the police station, in the commentary talks about they did 47 setups, and he doesn't repeat any angles. Now, not repeat any angles. It might be slightly off. But what he said was that this was intentional because he really wanted to build tension. So much of the movie isn't doing this, that when you start to do it in this scene, and again, when you're coming back to an angle, it's like, it's similar to what we just saw, but slightly different. It puts the audience a little bit off kilter, and it really starts to build the tension throughout that scene. And again, this is why I say, like, I so admire Bogdanovich's direction in this movie, because like, it's clear that this is a filmmaker who has thought all of this through. And again, when you know that he's cutting in camera, he's not shooting additional coverage. Like, all of this is meticulously thought out and planned out down to the last detail, which I think is really interesting. But then what is also really interesting is to think about the fact that Bogdanovich, he also talks about his sort of like working with the actors, because he was originally trained as an actor. He worked with Stella Adler. Like, he wanted to be an actor. And he says that he always likes to sort of put himself in the actor's place so that he understands the sort of problems that they might face. And in these making of documentaries, they would show him basically the way he works. His process is he's going to act everything out for the actors. He's going to do the blocking so that he can sort of encounter, if we do this, he might not be able to reach here when I want him to. So we'll have to adjust this. But he says, like, it's so much easier for me to just show them rather than tell them what I want. Which resonates with me, because I feel like when I was directing, or whenever I direct, I'm the exact same way. I really struggle to sort of express what I want, but I can just sort of show and walk it through so much better. And I remember doing that whenever I had to direct in school or whatever. Which I just think.
Well, maybe we should talk about the actors. I mean, that feels like a nice transition to get into the O'Neals and also Madeline Kahn and the rest of this cast. So, what's the deal with the O'Neals? How did Tatum O'Neal come to be cast in this? I guess in particular, because we've covered What's Up, Doc, which also has Ryan O'Neal as in a leading role. So we know we had that previous relationship with him. But what about Tatum O'Neal?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, again, it comes down to Polly Platt. She basically, when she suggested to him that he do this movie because, you're a father and you have daughters, she's like, I also know a person who I think could play the kid, which is Tatum O'Neal. And, so Bogdanovich, there's a story of him going to meet her and he goes to the house and she makes some comment, and it's a weird story because, like, when you hear the story, you're like, that doesn't really sound all that convincing, and why you would hire her, but like, allegedly that's why. But
what I heard from reading about it from Tatum O'Neal's perspective is they kind of went on a walk on the beach, and that was secretly her audition.
Yes,
and she didn't know it at the time, but it was just a conversation. Yeah, but by the end of it, Peter Bogdanovich was sort of convinced she could do the role, supposedly.
But what's interesting is it sounds like it was more, or at least this is what Bogdanovich says, is that, yeah, she's good, and if we hire her, we could get Ryan O'Neal to play her dad, which could be interesting. And he says, I really wanted to work with Ryan again. And this was an interesting way of, like, I want to work with him, so I guess if she can act, then that works, and then there's that dynamic there. What's really interesting is that Paramount did not want to hire Ryan O'Neal because, and I did some digging, and I guess the real reason is that O'Neal has an affair with Ally McGraw on the set of Love Story. Ally McGraw is married to Bob Evans, the head of Paramount, and so therefore he's like, I don't want you working with this guy. But Bogdanovich basically says, no, like, we're either doing it with them or I'm not doing it. And the studio relented and let them cast them. So it's interesting. I wanted to unpack that because we both, when we watched What's Up, Doc, we were kind of like, who is this Ryan O'Neal guy? He's not very good. And maybe it's just because he's being overshadowed by Barbra Streisand and Madeline Kahn. I don't know. But like, I thought he was much, much, much better in this compared to What's Up, Doc, which is like a couple years earlier. Like, what was your take on him?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He's much better in this than in that. I definitely think that their dynamic is as father and daughter comes through in the way it's shot on screen, but probably not in the way that Polly Platt and Peter Bogdanovich were imagining.
Yeah,
I think the thing in What's Up, Doc, and everything else I've kind of seen him in, he's very monotone and not very expressive. And he's quite expressive in this, mostly in how annoyed he is and how angry he is.
Yes.
And from everything I've read, again, this is all alleged, but it seems like that is very reflective of his relationship with Tatum.
Yes.
And so that's the thing that comes through to me that is different than What's Up, Doc, is that he gets worked up on screen and is mad and emasculated and all of this sort of stuff that actually really maps onto everything I've read about their relationship on set and after this movie. So
yeah,
I think that's the missing ingredient.
There's an outtake from the scene where he's like eating waffles in the hotel and she comes down and she keeps screwing up her lines and he's actually eating on screen, which like actors famously say, like, don't eat on screen. It seems like a good idea at the time, and then you do 70 takes where you're eating pancakes, and he literally has a breakdown. He's like, Tatum, I can't eat another goddamn waffle. Like, you just get the line right. And like, he does it in a slightly comedic way, and I think that's the reason why they show this take and not the other takes where he's maybe doing the same thing but not being so nice. But you definitely get a sense of like, okay, like oh boy, this is a little bit awkward because it's her real like, and again, it's her real dad, so he can do that. Like, whereas if it was another actor working with another actor, maybe there would be less of that. But yeah, you also, Bogdanovich basically says like, we took turns yelling at Tatum, like, because she was apparently, understandably, an 8-year-old is going to be difficult to work with on set, and sort of like they would allegedly take turns kind of like yelling at her for screwing up because they didn't want it to always be one of them, and cause like a problem with the director, I guess. So it was like, I don't know if Ryan took one for the team or what the deal was, but yeah, sometimes when she would screw up, Bogdanovich would get on her case, and then other times her dad would get on her case. Right.
But it does speak to like the mismatch maybe between like working with a child actor and Bogdanovich being like, we have to have these incredibly long takes. It's like, I understand why you wanted to do that. And also, maybe it was not really a fair expectation of an 8-year-old to be able to like memorize all of this and then absolutely nail these long takes. And it's the type of thing that now probably just wouldn't happen because you would have much more protections around the child, as well as like, I don't know, like, are there any other examples of father and daughter or like parent and child in movies more recently acting opposite one another? Because it does feel like it was kind of a recipe for a disaster in certain ways.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of like instances where that, like, I'm sure
maybe as adults, but not with like children.
Yeah, like I think the Douglases, like Michael and Kirk, have worked together before and stuff. But again, never when they're that young, I don't think. Like maybe,
and the Sheens.
Yeah, the Sheens. Maybe I want to say like Jeff Bridges and Lloyd Bridges maybe have.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know. Even Liza and Judy Garland, like they did famously work together, but it was like later in their careers. So I don't know. This feels like it has to be, a rare one-off instance. But I also spent so much of the movie trying to peg who Ryan O'Neal reminded me of. I was like, he kind of gives me Channing Tatum vibes, kind of gives me Chris Pratt vibes. But every time I look at him, I'm like, especially with the mustache, I'm like, he looks like some actor, and I can't put my finger on it. And I was like, is it maybe a little bit of like Ryan Phillippe? Like, I don't know. There's just he kept reminding me of someone, and I just couldn't put my finger on who it was, and it was driving me crazy.
Interesting. I will say, like, when I was watching a trailer for The Sting just to kind of refresh myself in this conversation. And I was like, when I saw Paul Newman, I was like, oh, actually, there's a little bit of the Ryan O'Neal thing going on in that role in particular.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. And I remember we had this discussion on What's Up Doc. Like, you reminded me of someone, of an actor, but I just can't place who it is. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I do want to talk a little bit more about Tatum, though. Like, Nate, you, for whatever reason, you strike me as someone who does not like child actors. So whether or not that's accurate, how did you feel about her performance? Do you think she was effective? Do you think she was Oscar worthy? Is she getting the Oscar just because everyone is just sort of like surprised that she kind of pulls it off, or like?
Yeah, I do think that there is a bit of, it's impressive what she's able to do on screen, right? Mm-hmm. Just like, again, these long takes, and the sort of range that she's expected to pull off in this. And I think she does a pretty good job. I do think it's just like, she still seems like a child actress to me, like, I think that's just a reality. I do think Bogdanovich's direction helps a lot, and the sort of scenes that are given to her, like the scene where she is in front of the mirror, like trying on her mother's perfume and all of that, and kind of posing and trying to, like, be a grown-up, I guess, like, is very affecting. And whether that's because of her acting or because of Bogdanovich's direction, it gets kind of blurry there. I think she does a very good job with all of the dialogue and kind of big dogging Ryan O'Neal in those scenes of, like, believably steamrolling him.
Yeah.
And again, like, when she's an 8-year-old girl at the time and he's a grown-ass adult, who admittedly kind of does the exact same thing in What's Up, Doc, and gets steamrolled by Barbra Streisand.
Yeah.
But I think their dynamic works in that, like, she always seems to be the high status character in those scenes. So it works for me. I wouldn't say that there was any moment where I was kind of, like, really moved by her performance in terms of, like, connecting with her as, like, this character, if that makes sense. But it's still an impressive feat,
Yeah, I kept sort of thinking about famous child performances on screen.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of Elliot in E.T., which I think is maybe, like, the best example. Or maybe, like, a Haley Joel Osment in... like Sixth Sense, where I feel like those are they're kind of around the same age. It's actually funny. There's a sitcom that my wife and I really like called Life in Pieces, and there's a same age. She was 8 years old in the first season. There's a character, Sophia. She's like the youngest daughter of this family, and she's so precocious, but also, like, really funny. Like, delivers some of the best lines and jokes in the show, and, like, I think it's an interesting interplay because, like, she's the same age as Tatum O'Neal,
right?
And, like, I think she's a better performer than maybe Tatum O'Neal, but she's obviously not. She doesn't really have to do any dramatic acting, whereas this, like, Tatum is expected to do some dramatic stuff here. It's like she's not just delivering jokes, so, like, that is a bit more challenging. But then I also think about a movie like Stand By Me, where those kids are admittedly a little bit older.
Yeah.
But, like, that I do think is probably the best, like, children acting on screen.
It's pretty incredible.
Of all time. Yeah. Like, River Phoenix's performance, Jerry O'Connell's performance in that, like, it's incredible. Yeah. And, like, they're maybe, like, in the 10 to 13 year range. So, like, 8, and that's the thing, I think you
have to grade on a curve a little bit.
Old. Like, that's really, like, it is very impressive. And that they get as much out of her as they did, as much as it clearly was a struggle, and, like, Bogdanovich, basically admits, like...
And it may have ruined both of their lives. Like...
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's, like, that's the thing, is, like, there's a reason why like you might want to age down an actor, right? Of be like, yeah, the character's 8 and we're gonna, you know, but it's gonna be played by an 11 or 12-year-old.
So, well, but I guess my question for you is like, do you think it was worth casting real father and daughter?
No.
Like, what do you think?
Not
what do
at
you think
all.
of
Not at all.
the dynamic and but like, do you think something comes out of that like the dynamic because they're actually related? Or
yes, but I think, like I said, I think the thing that comes out of it is the toxicity of their relationship is actually the stuff that feels the most real, and the sort of like tenderness is the part that feels the most acted, and that is very distressing because it, again, like it does sort of reflect reality to me. But the story is telling us that it is a heartwarming story of bonding between these two characters. And maybe I just can't help but see that. But, you know, because I know.
Yeah, I don't know though, because what I was gonna say is like, I do think it's also kind of interesting though, because like at the end of the day, like he is. The question, of course, is whether or not they're actually, if Moses really is her dad. And so there is this interesting interplay there of like the frustration if she's not really his kid, then he would be more inclined to be frustrated with her.
Sure.
Which speaks to the fact that maybe O'Neal's a shitty dad. I don't know. But like you do get this really, I do think there's an interesting interplay there, and it's not just like clever stunt casting of like, let's cast this father and daughter, and like, isn't that can be something we can market the film on. Like, I do think that you get an interesting interplay as a result, but yeah, maybe it wasn't worth it is more the ultimate question.
In life, you know,
the irreparable harm it did to their relationship was probably not.
I think like whatever we get out of it that is that sort of intangible quality, I think is definitely not worth the strife it caused. But even if it was like a more functional relationship between a father and daughter, I'm not sure. I think, you know, and maybe because you're hiring a child actor that is that young, that may also be part of what we are getting out of it, is the sort of ability of a father to communicate with a daughter that's 8 years old about like what's needed. Again, even if he steps over the line. But again, like if you were to cast older and cast someone who's outside the family, you could probably also get there. You know what I mean? And it's maybe at the end of the day, it's just not worth casting someone that's 8 years old to play such a heavy role.
Yeah, I have such mixed feelings about child actors in general, which is ironic because, like, as a kid, I wanted to be one, and then, like, was not allowed, and now I'm sort of grateful. But there's a lot of moral issues with it that I grapple with, and so, like, again, you hear the stories, the alleged stories from this, and you're like, oh boy, like this is even worse. So I don't know. I think she gives a very good performance. Again, Academy Award winning, The Exorcist comes out the same year.
Yeah.
I think Linda Blair's performance in The Exorcist eats Tatum O'Neal's
100%. Like, but how much older is she though?
Let's see. So she's 5 years older. Okay, so that's
why. But
okay,
but again, it's like just cast someone who's a little older. Even a few years, 4 years older would be huge.
But here's what I would say. Regardless of age, my point is, as a performance, I think Linda Blair's performance is stronger than Tatum O'Neal's performance. Yes, it may be impressive that she's an 8-year-old, but like, I'm sorry, I think Linda Blair is doing way more there and deserves that Oscar more than
Tatum. Even in the scenes where she's not playing possessed, she's fantastic in that movie. That's part of why it works. So
exactly. So anyway, Madeline Kahn.
Yeah, also nominated. It's so worth talking about.
Let's talk about her for a little bit. It's worth comparing the two. Again, I adore Madeline Kahn and think she's one of the funniest comedians of her generation. And yet, I feel like she doesn't really wow me in this film.
No, me neither. I think totally forgettable role, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that entire second act just kind of stops the movie dead in its tracks. And I understand what it's trying to do, but for whatever reason, it doesn't really resonate with me. Now, that being said, this is only her third film, which is, again, just like, this is one of those actors who just like literally comes out fully formed and shot out of a cannon, and is just
and again, who we loved in What's Up, Doc, right?
Yeah, and I love her in literally everything else I've ever seen her in. And again, Bogdanovich was like, she was my first choice for the role, didn't read her, just basically was like, here you go. Like, you have the role.
Yeah.
I'm not reading anybody else. This is yours. Like, I want you to play this role.
Yeah.
Which is understandable. Again, there was an interesting quote that he said, like, I kind of liked the idea of the old school way movies were made, where studios sort of had like their troops that would move from film to film. And there's a couple other What's Up Doc actors in this. And like, so again, he's paying homage to this era, again, the nostalgia, right? Like, he's paying homage to this era of like, he likes the idea of like, I want to work with the same people over and over again, because like, we just can create this sense of trust and this bond. So it kind of makes sense that he would come back to her. But again, it's just like, in a weird way, she's just not given enough material to work. I think that's
what it boils down to. It's not really her performance. Again, it's super surprising to me that she was nominated for an Oscar for this. I don't totally get it, but I really think it has more to do with the script and the character than anything else. So, I mean, basically, just to give the background a little bit, right? I mean, she's basically this circus performer that Moses picks up. And like wants her to be his girlfriend, but it's clear that she's kind of grifting him. And he's a total mark for this. Yeah. And Addie sort of picks up on this, but it's also mixed together with her sort of resentment of this other female character that's coming into her father figure's life. And maybe the lack of her mother in the picture, and sort of like not wanting her to be her mother. So there is some interesting like, emotional stuff wrapped up in it, but it just like comes, like I said before, it comes in the middle of the movie and does not lead to the climax of the movie. It's resolved before the climax. And so it just feels like it's a little out of place. Like it's this whole story within the story that, again, if you're doing this as a TV show, you could do that as an episode or an arc of episodes and that would be fine. But it just feels a little beside the point, I guess, of the story as a whole.
So the one other actress I do want to sort of bring up is PJ Johnson, who plays Imogene, who is sort of like, how would you describe her?
She's a domestic worker for like, Trixie Delight, the Madeline Kahn character.
Yeah. So, and there's a scene where she's in the backseat of the car talking to Addie and sort of essentially telling her that like,
what's up?
Your father's being played here. And the studio hated this scene. They saw early rushes of it and were like, this is awful. Because again, PJ Johnson was similarly, I think she's like 16 or another like young, unknown actress, untested, but you know, he really wanted that energy that a young person brings. And the studio's just like, this is garbage. So Bogdanovich, a couple days later, sits down with both of the actors and he says, like, I had a real adult conversation with them. I treated them like they were adults. And I explained, like, what this scene is about and talked about their characters. And I was like, you know, throw it all away. Like, rather than talking to them as children and how you might try and... He's like, I just treated them like if I was having this conversation with adult actors. And they go back and they reshoot the scene and he says, like, they nailed it. And the studio... he shows the studio the reshoot and they're like, oh, I'm so glad you recast that part. She's so much better, right? And Bogdanovich are like, yep.
Yeah.
And so it's just again, like, yeah, exactly. So I think that speaks to him as a director that, like, again, he was able to get there.
Yeah.
Whether or not his instincts in initially casting, I guess they were right because he got where he needed to go. But it's just funny that his insistence on casting these young actors is working against him and requires him to work so much harder when, as you say, you could have just cast someone a little bit older with a little bit more skill and played them young, and you could probably avoid a lot of hate.
And I will say, so Peter Bogdanovich I do think is a great director, and also he's a real self-mythologizer.
He sure
and
is.
I think that scene is the weakest scene in the movie. And I think it is partly like when I was watching it, it appears that PJ Johnson is reading her lines off of something in front of her. And so it's like he got through it, but whether he got to the level that he was looking for is maybe, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. Like that's an example where it's like, okay, I get it. You have this philosophy of like the long takes. This might have been an instance where you just need to roll with the punches and get the performance you need, because
piece it together.
Other scenes with PJ Johnson, she's really good, right? It's just that, but like that expectation of being able to memorize a long scene and deliver it in one take is just maybe too much. But like the scenes where she and Addie are like sharing a look in the hallway when they're kind of conning Mose and Trixie Delight. It's like those are great. Like they really have a nice dynamic in those scenes when it's not being spoken. But that scene really stood out to me as being kind of like, oh, okay, I can see that this is a performance, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing we really need to like unpack and touch on the most is sort of like the visual language here.
Yeah.
Like we've touched on it, but like I really want to unpack it with you because I think it's, as a former cinematographer yourself, I really would love to get your read on it.
Well, I mean, we have to acknowledge first of all that this is shot by Laszlo Panaflex himself, Laszlo Kovacs.
Yeah, exactly. Yes,
who actually did. You know, we have talked about his cinematography before because he also did What's Up, Doc. I wouldn't be surprised if we've done another movie that also was shot by him. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm sure we will at some point because the guy is a freaking legend.
Yeah, a legend and very prolific. Yeah, I mean, this movie looks absolutely incredible, right?
Well, so this was the thing. I wanted to ask you, like, did you notice anything unique about the cinematography?
Yeah.
Outside of the fact that it's in black and white.
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, first of all, I do want to just start with the credits, which is like there's a font in these credits that I do think is teaching you how to watch the movie, right? Because Bogdanovich's insistence that this is not a nostalgic movie is reinforced by the opening credits, which have a very modern, like 70s font. And so even though it's in black and white, you're immediately like, oh, this is like cool. Like I've never seen credits like this.
Well, it's interesting because Polyplot apparently found that typeface and it is period accurate.
Sure, I believe that.
Like she found it on some like poster from the era. But yeah, you're right. It's so unlike what you were used to seeing.
Right. It might have been used on posters of the era, but I don't think you would ever see that in the opening credits of a movie of that era.
No.
And so, like, that's the thing that they're sort of taking something of the era, but they're sort of collaging it in a modern way. And so I think it's immediately telling you, like, okay, this is in black and white, and it's taking place in the 30s, but it's not what you think it's going to be. It's not just recreating that. And so... And then I think the movie really, for the most part, like especially visually, really does take you to this sort of modern take on that period. So obviously it's in black and white. I think the biggest thing that I noticed in terms of the cinematography is it is very high contrast, and it has very deep focus. Like you really can see the whole scene, right? And there are a lot of like long shots where you do actually get to see all of the details of a room and all of that kind of stuff in great detail. So like that's probably what I noticed the most. I did also notice like the eyes of the O'Neals just popping like crazy. And I'm not sure exactly why that is. I'm sure there's a bit of lighting involved. And they both have blue eyes. So translated to black and white, that's probably part of it. But there may be other reasons why they're so like unbelievably high contrast. But that was like what definitely jumped out at me. And the whole visual language, like again, you and I, we made a film in high school together that was in black and white. And it's like, I feel like I internalized the aesthetic of this movie indirectly, like secondhand somehow. Yeah. And it was like I wish I could do in black and white cinematography, because it's just got this incredibly crisp, high contrast style that is so appealing.
Well, it's interesting too, because of course we shot on mini DV.
Yes.
Or no, not.
Yeah, it was mini DV.
Was that shot? I couldn't remember if it was shot on mini DV or digital.
No, I'm pretty sure it was mini DV.
Regardless, it was. Yeah, I think you're right. So we're shooting on like consumer grade, standard definition digital video at the time. But by the nature of the fact that it was like Sony camcorders had, the depth of field was non-existent.
Right.
And at the time we were like, we hated that because it didn't look cinematic, but it's this funny thing of like, in a weird way, you're right. Like that movie has a very similar look as a result. And we were going for a very high contrast look. So what's really interesting is that they, again, the black and white he felt like would convey the period, it would look too pretty and too much like a movie.
Or color would look like that.
Yes, color would, yes. And Kovacs meets with Orson Welles, because he's besties with Bogdanovich,
Sure.
and he says, use a red filter, my boy, only a red filter. It accentuates the face and makes the face white and chalky, holds back the blue of the sky, and creates like this really strong visual contrast.
Wow.
But also it meant that they needed tons and tons and tons of light in order to get that, like, to deal with the depth of field and make sure that you have such a, you know.
Right. Because, like, red light is what you use in a dark room to avoid things getting exposed.
Exactly.
So you need extra light.
And they're shooting outdoors most of the time, but even the sunlight wasn't enough, so they would have to, like, bring in these incredibly hot arc lights to, like, really just amp everything up. But yeah, Bogdanovich talks about how basically he likes the idea of having it wide open because everything is in focus, which is how the eyes see. He's like, Orson Welles did this a lot, of course, you know, calling out his buddy Orson. But he's like, you see the background, everything is sharp, so you feel like you're really there, which is kind of interesting. Again, he's sort of moving away from nostalgia. It's creating a sense of reality, a grittier feeling. There's a visual essay on the Criterion disc where they sort of talk about how it helps to not only ground you in the reality of the world, but it also grounds the comedy. It adds tensions to scenes that might otherwise just feel like gags if it was in color, which is kind of an interesting thought that I didn't really think about. That, like, again, it's sort of, it removes a little, despite adding artifice because the world isn't in black and white, it does, in a weird way, remove it forces, I think it's the classic thing of, like, it forces you to recognize, oh, I'm watching a movie, therefore I need to suspend my disbelief. Whereas if it was in color, you can kind of, you're not forced to suspend your disbelief as much, and therefore the jokes can be a little more, oh, now they're doing a joke,
you know,
right?
we were talking about a while ago, like in music, right, the idea of Mickey Mousing. And I think there's a way, though, that actually cinematography can do the same thing, where it's like, by cutting in or cutting out, you're kind of stepping on the joke or overemphasizing the joke. And instead, like, staying with the take lets the joke breathe and stand on its own and be more about acting and less about, like, you know, boom, like the sort of the director overstating what the joke is, you know?
And I also want to shout out, you know, on top of Kovacs's incredible work here, I want to, again, shout out Polly Platt, who's the production designer, because she had these, like, so again, everything is shot on location, basically. All the exteriors are there. They had to, like, add stuff to the interiors of all these stores because they were basically abandoned and empty.
Sure.
But there were two things I noticed in terms of the detail that I loved, which was, one, obviously the period cars, but she said she found this photo that all of the cars back then, when they park, you know, when we park nowadays, we park, you know, you parallel park one in front of the other. Whereas back then they all sort of parked side to side diagonally.
Sure.
So they made sure that, like, all the cars were parked that way, which again just adds to the authenticity. But again, the authenticity just helps with this creating this sense of realism. And then the other thing that I didn't really recognize that I had noticed, but I had noticed it I hadn't clocked it until it was pointed out. In the commentary, Bogdanovich gets a call from Jack Benny. And Jack Benny is this comedian who was famous on the radio.
Yeah, and often referenced on The Simpsons. Like the yes guy comes from the Jack Benny show.
Exactly, yeah. And they're listening to Jack Benny in the film. So I imagine that's how the phone call happened.
Sure.
Like, he had to get permission or whatever. And Jack Benny asks him, he goes, how come in your pictures there's never anybody in the streets? And Bogdanovich flippantly says, well, I don't like extras. And he says, no, but really, like, he says, when you walk around these streets of these little towns, you don't ever really see people. Yeah. And there is this sort of sense of, like, yes, it's weird that they're essentially in these ghost towns, but, like, it does, again, it creates a mood of, like, why are there no people here? And it sort of emphasizes the Depression era, and just, like, everything is kind of bleak and awful.
Yeah, well, and also, like, you know, if there were just a bunch of extras around, it would feel like The Music Man. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it would just be like, you're on the back lot with all these people, and it's like this sort of very romantic view of small town life where, like, everyone's always outside enjoying themselves, and, like, everyone knows everyone, and we have lots of community events. And it's like, yeah, there is that side of small town life. Speaking as someone who lives in a small town, but there was also times where it's really empty and, like, it's sparsely populated, and, you know, you don't live in Brooklyn.
Yeah. What's so interesting to me is that I also sort of am like, yeah, it's an interesting choice, because I feel like this is sort of, not to be disparaging, but like it's sort of a hallmark of what I refer to as the Canadian movie aesthetic of like where things just feel a little bit off.
Sure.
And it's like, I can always sort of peg it because it's like, yeah, there's extras in the scene, but there's not enough extras.
Right.
Like, so it feels empty because you're like, there's this huge amount of space and there's only like 6 people in the frame. And whereas here it's like, there's really only the people involved in the scene and no extras. And that starkness it feels like a choice, a deliberate choice, and not a, an element of like, we don't have the budget to fill this entire frame.
And the thing is too, like there are scenes where there are extras. So it's like when they go to the carnival, and maybe I'd have to watch it again to double check this, but it didn't feel empty to me watching it.
No, the carnival scene definitely is like hustling.
Right. And so I think that
like
contrast.
The streets are feeling
right.
empty. Yeah,
the contrast of having some scenes where there clearly are enough extras to fill it and feel like, yeah, this is an actual carnival, and then have other scenes where it's empty. It makes it feel, it avoids that sort of uncanny valley you're getting at, which is like something feels off about this. No, it's like clearly a choice. Here is empty and here is crowded.
What about the music or lack thereof, Nate? Like, what was your feelings about the sort of choice to again avoid any score and just everything is diegetic and like of the piece?
Yeah, I mean, again, it just totally leans into Bogdanovich's theory of the case, or his thesis of the movie, which is the sense of realism. I think it totally works. And the nice thing is there still is enough of that diegetic music that it does feel like there is score or there is music that's sort of carrying the film along. It doesn't feel quiet. It feels bubbly often because of the music that they're playing. But then at key moments, it does fully drop out. And like one of the things that I definitely picked up on was the climax, which I guess we'll talk about soon. But Moses is being chased around this town, and there's absolutely no music in this scene. I think there's maybe a bell tolling, and there's like and then just the sound of like footsteps running and things like that, which very much reminded me of The Third Man, which does a similar thing in the final chase scene. There's no music; it's just the sound of running. Similar sorts of shots and everything too, which I have to imagine is not unintentional. Like just knowing what Bogdanovich, his relationship with history, his relationship with Orson Welles, I'd imagine that he's quite aware that like he may not be directly referencing that, but there's a bit of an influence there.
100%.
So yeah, I mean, I loved it. I thought it was perfect.
The restraint of not using like banjo getaway music in that whole, because like that's kind of what a lesser film would have done. Like you could, The Simpsons would have done that.
Well, and I think What's Up Doc does that, right? Kind of as a joke,
right? So yeah, so it's this like interesting sort of sense of being a little bit more reserved and like it actually being really effective.
Yeah.
Are there any other like specific scenes you wanted to call out? Because essentially, as you said, this movie is very episodic, so it's really just like a series of vignettes tied together through this loose plot line.
Yeah, I mean, I think
which ones?
The cafe scene or the diner scene, it sort of captures what this movie is at its best, right? Which is just Ryan O'Neal's character, Tatum O'Neal's character, sitting at a diner arguing.
Just because a man meets a woman in a barroom don't mean he's your pa. Eat your Coney Island.
Well, then if you ain't my pa, I want my $200.
And she's sort of asking if he's her father. He's insisting that she's not, and he's going to take her to her aunt's. She's saying that she owes him, or that he owes her money. And he's just basically telling her to shut up and eat her hot dog.
I want my money. You took my $200.
Will you quiet down? You hear?
I want my $200.
Hold on. Just hold on.
And it's just like, it's funny. It's beautiful to look at. Yeah. The acting is great. Like, this is one of those scenes where like Addie's eyes are just popping. Like they look unbelievably beautiful, just catching the light in this perfect way. But at the same time, it's hilarious. And so that balance is really, I think, what this movie is all about.
I mean, it's the scene that Bogdanovich basically said, like, I can make the movie based on this scene alone. And I think it's
right.
I think it's probably where they're at their best. Their dynamic is at their best. Like,
totally.
Interplay where you sort of go, okay, like, this is the reason why you cast these two people. Because, again, like, even just his sort of lousy father instincts on display of, like, when he's, he's like, eat your Coney Island. Like, it's just like, or he's, like, trying to, like, put stuff on it, and then the when the waitress comes over and is like, "Oh, do you want to buy your daughter some ice cream?" and all this. Like, it's just, I think that scene sort of that's the reason the movie gets made, basically.
Totally. And my other favorite detail from that scene is just as he's getting more worked up because she keeps like kind of interrogating him. He puts some sugar in his coffee and he tastes it, and then he pours like the whole damn like thing of sugar in his coffee, and he's just like talking the whole time while he's doing it. It's like that's a classic Peter Bogdanovich old fashioned comedy sort of bit that totally works for me in that scene. Totally. What about you, Adam? Is there one that stands out for you?
I just loved all of the scams. Like, I am such a I mean, I love heist movies and con movies, so like I just loved watching them play out. It's funny. I worked in high school. I worked at Sobeys. For our American listeners, it's a grocery chain. So I worked at a grocery store as a cashier, and I remember being taught about this change scam where they basically they will try and quickly overwhelm you with making change and to confuse you, and essentially you give them more money than they've given you. And we were told, like, whenever somebody asks, like, always close your register as soon as you're done with it, because you have to unlock it in order to open it, and that will give you enough time to process like what they're asking for. And so, yeah, it was just like, but it was one of those things. And it's funny, apparently Ryan O'Neal never fully understood the mechanics of what he was doing. And he just was like, I don't get it. Like, what did I do here? And Bogdanovich was like, it's fine, Ryan. Just do it. It's fine.
Don't worry about it.
Which just like, again, kind of emphasizes that this guy may not be the sharpest tool in the shed. But I also, the other scenes I really like more specifically, are the Bible sale cons.
Yeah.
Can't we go now? I want to get to church and pray for Mama.
Again, it sort of speaks to what I talked about before, but like showing, not telling. First off, you see that Addie is an adept con, but you also understand that she's really intelligent, but also has a heart. Yeah. And specifically when they go to the poor family who has they've got 10 children or whatever, and she's like, Daddy, remember he prepaid.
Right.
And then when they go to the rich lady, and she's like, Daddy, $21.
Yeah.
Like, and she gives up the money without second guessing it. Like, you realize, she's better at this than most.
She's better at reading people, for sure.
Yeah, but she's also she's childlike and she's pure. And I said she's very Lisa Simpson.
Yeah.
Like, Lisa would never pull a con.
Right.
But she's kind of wise beyond her years, and that was this thing. I kept thinking, I'm like, if Lisa were ever to turn to the dark side, if Lisa were pulling those scams with Homer,
it reminds me of Lisa the Greek, where she starts betting with her dad, right?
Right,
and then eventually turns it into a moral quandary for him about who will win and whether or not she still loves him. It's definitely got a bit of that flavor for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. If to think back to the episode we talked about, if Lisa had been running those cons with Bart, they would have probably gotten away with even more. But her moral character would never allow her to. So.
Right.
I guess that brings us to the ending of the movie, which we should probably sort of unpack because, it's not great.
I mean, I think the climax for me loses steam a little bit, right? And I don't think that Bogdanovich does a very good job of raising the stakes near the end of the movie. I agree. There's sort of basically they get into some hot water with their scam, and there's a car chase, and they end up in the police department, and and that at one point, maybe one of the most Simpsons-y moments, they go to a farm to get rid of their car and encounter these hillbillies. And Ryan O'Neal goes, I'll wrestle you for it in order to trade in the car. And then he wrestles a hillbilly. That part is pretty great. But other than that whole sequence of the car chase feels a little kind of slow and clunky. Even the part that I was talking about, the third man sort of part where he's being chased through the town and then he gets beaten up. It just never really feels like they're in that much danger, or that or just even emotionally that the stakes feel super high. And so that part loses me a little bit, but then I actually like where it lands at the end. I think the ending itself is pretty good, but that climax loses me a bit. But what about you?
The one thing I will say is that I appreciate, again, speaking to the lack of sentimentality and nostalgia that the movie is attempting, is that the movie doesn't end sentimentally.
Right.
And it's funny because if you read that final draft of the script, its ending is very much what you would expect with, like, you know, Addie realizes she misses him, and she chases after him, and they embrace, and then, you know, ride off into the sunset kind of thing. Whereas what ends up happening is not that.
Right.
And, you know, Bogdanovich said they literally could not come up with an ending that they liked, and it wasn't until, like, the day they shot it, they basically figured it out. And Polly Platt and the other producer, Frank Marshall, who famously worked on Star Wars, they saw that road during sort of location scouting, and eventually they're like, it looks like a road to nowhere,
right?
Like a truly road to nowhere. And so eventually they bring Bogdanovich and show him it, and he's like, okay, great, this is where we'll shoot the ending. And he realized, you know, we never really pay off that "you owe me $200" gag.
Yeah.
And he's like, in comedy, there's that comedy maxim, you got to pay off the joke.
Right.
And so that's when he realized that's how we'll end the movie, is like she comes back to confront him, and when you think, oh, this is her being like, I love you, Daddy, I'm going to hug you, she goes, you still owe me $200.
Right.
That's sort of how they end the...
And he throws down his hat.
I do like
and then the car starts rolling down the hill, and they just have to get in before any of it's resolved. Like, that's the touch that's so perfect too, is like, they don't, like, you know, there's no sort of like loving embrace. She comes back and is still a pain in his ass. He's still frustrated, but then they just have to kind of get in the car and keep going. And
and I like that. I agree with you that the sort of like the setup of like them basically losing everything and how that all plays out a little too quickly and a little too like without stakes.
Yeah.
And it's just over before it really goes anywhere. But I do think the final sort of button of the film does work.
Yeah, totally. From the time where he like decides that he's going to take her back to her aunt's place and then drops her off, like that all works for me on from that. It's just the action stuff, I guess, doesn't totally work for me. Feels maybe a little bit disconnected from the characters, and it's not shot dynamically in the way that I would love for it to somehow.
I think part of it too is just like I almost wonder if it would work better if that portion of them getting busted for the rum running, and then it being like the sheriff's brother, if that had happened before Trixie.
Right, earlier in the movie, like, and then it comes back.
So that it's like, I think it's just maybe because it all happens within the span of like 10, 15 minutes, that it doesn't really have enough time to escalate.
Totally.
Maybe that's part of it. I don't
know. No, 100%. I think if it was set up earlier in the movie as something that they thought they'd gotten away from, and then it comes back at the end, like the cops catch up with them, like it happens kind of.
Yeah.
Like, and you're like, oh shit. Like, I think that would have kind of tied it together a little more, because like you're saying, it's like, it's a bit like Trixie, where it's just like, it's just this story element that's dropped in kind of in the middle of the movie and then becomes the climax, but like it doesn't feel tied into the broader story. So yeah, I mean, that part doesn't totally work, but overall, I mean, I'd say the first part up until Trixie is just like wall to wall, so great. And then the very end ties back to that beginning so nicely that like I can forgive a lot in that middle chunk that I'm maybe not like wild about, but by that point I'm so bought in, and it's fun. It's still fun to watch those two characters throughout all of the rest of that, even if it's not quite as high paced or exciting as the first part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Adam, shall we do a Simpsons speed round?
All right, Nate, take us away through the speed round.
All right. Adam, are there any moments in this movie that feel like Simpsons jokes but aren't?
I would say there are a couple, again, tying it back to Lisa, when there's that one part where someone calls Addie a boy and she's like, I'm a girl. And Lisa has that exact line in a couple of episodes. And then also the scenes where she's driving the car remind me of that shot. And I literally sent it to you on Instagram last night of Lisa driving the car. When Homer's like, when you drive the car, you can pick the radio. And then it like smash cuts to Lisa driving the car and listening to St. Elmo's Fire. It's just like a visual imagery that I think, it is Simpsons.
Yeah.
So that was my
totally. There was a moment, I think it's like where they see the rum runner and they're trying to like scam the rum runner. where like I think Mose is like, do you want to go for a walk before bed? And she goes, oh boy, and then they just like walk away.
Yeah.
Felt very much like a half-hearted Simpsons thing between like Bart and Homer.
Nate, did you learn anything about The Simpsons from this movie?
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely just that like weird connection between the 70s and then the 20s and 30s. And that like we do see that on The Simpsons too, that like maybe more so than any other era. It's like the 70s and then the like Depression era or like Prohibition Depression era are like the two most referenced parts of history. And that is very much like this kind of unlocked that for me because this era had that same nostalgia right when the Simpsons writers were growing up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Adam, does this movie still have some juice for some Simpsons parodies?
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting that it hasn't come up more often because in my research, I was reading that like it was very commonly shown on TV in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And so like what we've discussed, we've sort of unpacked this idea of like the movies that The Simpsons normally parody seem to be these movies that were constantly on like Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon at the movies or whatever. And this apparently was kind of a staple of that. So it's odd that it hasn't come up more. And even when it does, it's just like this tiny little reference. Like, again, as we sort of alluded to, the idea of like the father-daughter or like father-child scams, like that's such a Simpson-y idea.
Yeah.
So it's funny that they haven't sort of milked it more often because, and maybe it's just because they're like, well, we kind of did all we could do with it with that last, with the episode in question. But I don't know. I think there's more.
Yeah, it feels like one of those movies where it's like, yeah, they've kind of done the plot parody, but there's actually like a bunch of like little moments in this movie that you could kind of just pull out and slip into another story very comfortably.
Totally.
Like, you know, like the diner scene we were talking about, like you could just do that or even like combine it with When Harry Met Sally. You know, like there's sort of just like this moment. It's like, yeah, they eat at restaurants all the time. Like you could easily have something like that thrown in there, or the scene which we didn't really talk about, where Addie like refuses to get back in the car and is sitting up on the hill, and Ryan O'Neal and Madeline Kahn both try to convince her to do it and like fail to. Like there's a few moments like that just kind of stand on their own and could easily be taken out and added back in.
Nate, are there any characters in this movie that could become recurring Simpsons side characters?
So the female shopkeeper that they scam with that change scam, right? Her voice already sounds like a Simpsons side character of some kind. Like it's so distinctive and so funny that again you could just like take that wholesale and just like drop it in as a side character. I think. Definitely. Did you have one?
I was gonna say Randy Quaid's character is basically proto Cletus.
Yes.
So maybe they need to do like a Godfather 2 style flashback episode of the origins of the Cletus family. I don't know, but like that's just
so
again
Simpsons-y.
Anything with hobos is like and you know hillbillies feels very Simpsons-y. So absolutely,
absolutely, and just the I'll wrestle you for it. Like the way he says it is so just right out of The Simpsons. Adam, are there other movies by this director that The Simpsons should parody?
I mean, it's obviously we kind of addressed this. They did the What's Up Docness of it all. You know, it seems like The Last Picture Show, which is considered by everyone to be Bogdanovich's like masterpiece. So maybe this Targets movie that I keep hearing about, like it sounds like they could do a reference to that pretty easily. You know, the guy was pretty prolific and worked in, by all accounts, sort of worked across genres, so I feel like there's definitely some more stuff that they could unpack from Bogdanovich.
Yeah, lots to
but
choose
admittedly, I haven't seen enough of it to know.
Agreed. Yeah, I haven't seen The Last Picture Show, but like the setting seems very much like ripe for a Springfield connection. The sort of like small town, and things are kind of wrapping up, and you know everyone's trying to figure out what to do and how to grow up and all of that. That feels like it could definitely fit nicely in Springfield, but I also have not seen it, so I can't say for sure.
Well, that brings us to the final verdicts. Nate, do you think the strengths outweigh the weaknesses? I was really, really curious coming into it because I watched this before you, and I really genuinely thought, I was like, oh, Nate's not going to like this movie at all.
Yeah.
So I'm curious as to what your final takeaway was.
I mean, that's interesting. It's definitely not it's not in my wheelhouse. I will definitely say that. But like, especially watching the transfer that I was watching, it's just an absolutely stunning movie. Like it just looks and sounds incredible. And so I think for that alone, and then also like the fact that it is funny and it's clever and you're like watching scams, like, I mean, it's entertaining. Yeah. Like what can I say? Like, you know, yeah, I do think that there are some weaknesses in the latter half of the movie where it loses a little bit of steam. But again, it wraps up so nicely that I would definitely recommend it. And I think you will not be disappointed that you spent a little time watching this. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So I had bought this movie on iTunes a few years ago when it was on sale because this was in the list of David Fincher's 26 favorite movies, which I've slowly worked my way through, and I've only got like 4 left on the list. And I had known about this, like my dad had told me about this movie, and I love heist movies, so it had been on my watch, like on my radar for years. So I had bought it when it was on sale, finally watched it for this, and like I think I was maybe 20 minutes into the movie, and I literally pulled up Amazon and bought the Criterion 4K because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna want to hold on to this guy, because like you said, it is stunning. It's definitely a certain kind of movie that appeals to a certain kind of audience. Yeah. And I don't know that I would classify it as like my favorite heist movie ever. Like I think I still prefer The Sting to this in terms of a heist movie. Yeah. But in terms of like a relationship comedy and just like the interplay between these two characters, like there's more to this than just a simple heist. And I think that's what sort of elevates it. It's that visual language and that interplay between these two characters. That, again, maybe for better or for worse, are real life father and daughter that make it worth seeing. So I absolutely would recommend people check it out.
Totally.
What about extra credit, Nate? What would you sort of pair with this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there were kind of 2 routes you can go, right? And that would be the sort of like young person and adult relationship and like exploring that, or you can go the sort of scam con artist route. And so if I'm going the young person adult relationship route, I would say About a Boy, which I love.
You love that movie.
I think that movie is fantastic, and
I haven't seen that movie in forever. I really need to revisit.
It's so good. And speaking of like great child performances, man, like that movie has a fantastic one, and Hugh Grant, of course, also being. Like it is genuinely such a funny movie, and I think the relationship dynamic is a little bit similar, where you have sometimes the child is kind of like a little high status over Hugh Grant, and Hugh Grant is the flustered one, of course, but then it kind of balances out, and it's so emotionally resonant as well. I think it's just a great movie, and another great one where you can watch this sort of bond grow between two people, where again, like he's not, like his father, right? And so he has to kind of navigate that like weird space where he's kind of playing a father role, but he's not. And anyway, so that's a great one. And then again, if you just want to watch a bunch of great scams, Catch Me If You Can. It's just a fun con artist movie that does actually have a little bit of a father-son thing going on as well in it, but a little more below the surface than this movie, obviously. So yeah, those would be my 2 picks. But what about you, Adam?
Yeah, I was sort of like, again, I'm always curious, like, what is the best way to handle this sort of pairing? Because it's like, do you give something that's similar vibe, or do you give something that's like basically the same kind of plot? So the 2 things that came to mind, and I can't honestly remember if we've recommended this before or not. I know we both love this movie, so that's why I feel like maybe we have. But Matchstick Men.
Yes, so good.
Because I think why I like it is that it sort of perfectly dovetails between this and also the Simpsons episode, in that it's got like, there's a heist going on, and it's like revealed at the end that people who you thought were one thing weren't other things, but there's also this father-daughter dynamic in it. I think it's a really fun heist movie. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure it's written by the guy who wrote Ocean's 11, like the remake, which I love. Yeah, Ted Griffin wrote it. So, and he did write the Ocean's 11 remake. So,
I just searched our site, and I don't think you have recommended it before.
Okay, okay. I also searched our site, and I didn't see it, so that's why I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm in the clear here. But then the other movie that I couldn't stop thinking about watching this is a kind of an unseen, underrated Woody Allen movie called Sweet and Lowdown. where Sean Penn plays, I'm pretty sure he plays Django Reinhardt, or at least like there's something related to Django Reinhardt.
Okay.
So it's sort of set in the same period, and Samantha Morton's in it. Like and again, it's sort of this interesting, I think it's an interesting interplay because again, Bogdanovich and Woody Allen kind of, they're making films at the same time. They're both sort of these auteurist filmmakers. And because this Sweet and Lowdown is sort of set in the same period, I think it would maybe make like an interesting companion piece.
And the poster has a picture of Sean Penn sitting in a giant paper moon.
That is what actually like triggered
Right.
it, was when I saw the shot of the paper moon. I was like, holy shit, that's like the Sweet and Lowdown.
Right.
poster. So yeah. So anyway, I've only seen the movie once, and I haven't seen it since I first watched it in high school. So I don't even remember if I liked it. But I couldn't help but think about it, so that's why I was like, this is interesting.
I haven't seen it, but you'll be shocked to know that my parents love Django Reinhardt.
Yeah,
Checks out.
yeah, shocking.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they have seen this movie, and maybe I'll have to check that out. That's an interesting one. I can't say I was aware of it.
Yeah. Anyway, it's Sean Penn might have even been nominated for an Oscar, or she was nominated. Like I think there was some like awards buzz around it. So anyway, worth checking out. I think. But whereas I could confidently say that Matchstick Men is
Matchstick Men's a banger.
Worth going revisiting
one.
if you haven't. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us a review and share the episode with the Simpson fans and film buffs in your life. We've also set up a support page on our website where, if you want, you can throw us a couple of bucks to help cover costs of making the show. So, until next time, Nate,
We'll see you around the Plex. All right.
Only a paper moon.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't remember the song at all.
I don't remember it either, but it's close enough. It's, you just...
Yeah, it just sounds like an old-timey radio.
Exactly. Dateline, 1933. News on the march. Yeah. Okay. It's, as I said, it's very funny how, like, there's very little literature on this film, and, like, what exists, it's all the same stories. Like, so...
Right.
I watched like 3 documentaries and listened to the commentary, and I was like, okay, I'm just hearing the same like 5 talking points over and over again. This was kind of a waste of my time, but at least I did the work. So
yes.
And on that note, hi everybody.